Hello and welcome to the Yggdrasil podcast. I am your host, Radagon. Today we have Crunchy on the podcast. Thank you for coming, Crunchy.
Pleasure to be here.
So, let me just get everybody up to speed as to what we're going to be doing here. Crunchy and I are going to be talking mostly about lore. He's not a content creator, which is unusual for this channel, but he emailed me and he presented a convincing case that he had some interesting stuff to say about the lore. And normally I'm hesitant to, you know, adopt other people's theories lore-wise, but he made an interesting case, and frankly, I'm kind of lost. I'm at the point where I don't get it. I don't understand the lore. The questions that I'm at least not to my satisfaction, and I'm reaching the point where I'm like, oh, maybe it's impossible. It just can't be done. Like it's not whatever I find, and I've looked through almost every line of dialogue in the game. I've looked through all of the things, and I don't think it's possible to interpret the game through just in-game lore without looking at outside resources, and that's something that, well, Crunchy can help me talk about.
Yeah, sure. I mean, yeah, it's funny. I sort of feel the same way. Like I've been through everything, and there's still parts of it, like the formless mother and things that I really have no idea what's going on there. But I started, I saw there were a few videos that people made on sort of alchemical symbols and references to alchemy. And I thought they were kind of interesting, so I started exploring that further. And the more I look into that, the more it seems to be like a really essential part of at least the inspiration for Elden Ring. And I think I'm not going to say that like I understand exactly the whole game, but I feel like it opens up or it clears up a lot of mysteries.
Right. Okay. Do you have a specific place that you want to start?
Yeah. So that's I have a bunch of notes here for things that we could get into, and the thing about Elden Ring is that like everything's connected. So if we start in one place, we'll probably end up going
Right.
through everything. So
Right.
maybe I could just start by saying something about alchemy in general, just for people that aren't so familiar with it. So alchemy is this very old tradition, like the ancient Egyptians practiced alchemy. Thousands of years old. And for most of that time, it's basically just science. It's just chemistry. They're just experimenting with different chemicals, putting them through different processes, heating them up, dissolving things, all that sort of stuff. They're just talking about materials. And then later on, especially in the Victorian era, people became attracted to things that were sort of taboo and mired in the occult. And so the thing about the early alchemical texts and images is that because it was slightly taboo, and because there was this element of excuse me, an element of gatekeeping where you don't want to just give everyone the secret to eternal life or creating gold. You want to save that for the true alchemist, the person who really understands the import of it. So they wrote everything in this sort of code, this kind of allegorical language that's deliberately opaque. And that this is probably why Miyazaki likes it, because it's sort of similar to the way that FromSoft delivers their story. So instead of saying something like, okay, now you're going to add nitric acid to ammonium oxide, they would say, let the red dragon devour the white eagle. Okay, it's very sort of, lots of mythical and mystical symbols, and nothing is told in a sort of clear, straightforward way. And so as time went on, people became more and more interested in alchemy precisely for that part of it, the mystical, the sort of symbolic part of it. and they started to imbue that with a more spiritual meaning, so that maybe you're not talking about the transmutation of lead into gold. You're really talking about transmuting a part of your soul, sort of purifying yourself and becoming a more complete person. So there are these two different kinds of alchemy. This stuff which is really just about chemicals, mixtures, and then this sort of more mystical, spiritual side. And that spiritual part of it is kind of that's the stuff which is seeped into popular culture, like Full Metal Alchemist and Harry Potter and all that sort of stuff. It's got that magical quality to it, even though that wasn't originally there. And so one thing about that is that if you're, I think there's alchemy all over Elden Ring. But
let me just interject there, since you're going to be moving on to Elden Ring, and I just want to. Everything that you said about alchemy, as far as I'm aware, is correct. However, I would say that maybe the first part is overemphasized, where you mentioned that the earliest alchemists were just mixing chemicals, and they didn't have. While it's true that in the Victorian era, alchemy took on a more mystical, romantic kind of thing, it's not entirely clear that that wasn't also present in even the earliest alchemists, because it wasn't ever really science, because science as we know it today, people didn't think scientifically, like so when they were doing their chemical experiments, even in the earliest alchemists, they were mixing chemicals, they were messing with that, but it's not clear that they didn't already have a spiritual element to what they were doing, and they just thought it was science, and they just thought that it's not clear to me that they were only allegorical, even though they were written in an allegorical way.
No, that's a totally fair criticism, and I think you're absolutely right that I mean, I guess maybe one way to put it is that it wasn't any more sort of mystical or spiritual than anything of that time. It wasn't especially mired in this occult stuff. It was primarily about experimental practices on specific chemicals that may have had some kind of spiritual association with it. And there's this idea that, like, okay, searching for knowledge, understanding the universe, this is a spiritual practice in itself, whatever form it takes. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it's definitely got that element to it. But basically, I was just trying to kind of simplify into, initially you have this stuff which is primarily about materials and the physical world. And then over time, that element kind of gets lost, and alchemy becomes more about, like, the psyche and the soul.
So, yes, and I really don't want to get hung up on this. We'll spend all day if we bicker over minutia and semantics. But as I have seen it, because I've done some small amount of research into alchemy, and I've done it more into mythology and how ancient peoples used to think, and they didn't have this kind of distinction that we have today between material world and psychological world, I don't think. And so that's the only reason that I because it might be important later on in our discussion with Elden Ring, because even ancient Egyptians, the spiritual world was often material for them, like especially if they actually believed their mythologies. There wasn't a very clear distinction between one and the other. That's all I'm saying.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's we could go down a whole rabbit hole with that, and I mean the idea of, like, Platonic forms, and there's lots of stuff we could go with that. I basically the reason I wanted to kind of make this point, and I totally see the criticism there, was just to make a kind of disclaimer, which is that you have to be very careful when tying alchemical symbols to something like Elden Ring, because I think they're there. I think the connections are there.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing is that you have lots of different versions of the same thing in alchemy. You have lots of different, one symbol can be interpreted lots of different ways. There's processes which have a bunch of different versions of the same process. So it's I'm very aware of this as I'm looking into this stuff, that like I'm looking for patterns, and that means that I'm prone to, confirmation bias and sort of cherry picking. So basically that's all to say, anyone listening to this should be very critical of my theories.
Well, let me just get that out of the way. Let me make sure the audience knows this is a safe space for Elden Ring's lore speculation, and I will not be held responsible for the things I say in this podcast. And I reserve the right to completely change my mind on anything that I may express on here. Only the theories and ideas that I posit in my actual videos are things that I stand by completely, because I've given that enough thought, and I've let that marinate enough, and I've done my research. Those are the things that I'm willing to put the Radatusker's seal of approval on. This is speculation, and in order to have conducive, free-spirited speculation that's useful for actually developing my theories, we need to be able to be free to say things that maybe are wrong or turn out to be wrong later, worry-free. So I have no interest in being correct in the things that I say in these podcasts.
Yeah, that's very good. And I also want to say, like, whenever you're bringing in an external source to understand something, my instinct is to be very skeptical, because I still believe it has to be supported by what's actually the content. I don't want to.
Right.
It's very common with especially the FromSoft games, that people kind of, they take an idea and they run with it, and maybe they run with it far past where it's supported. So all that to say, this is highly speculative, but I think the major points are highly supported by what's in the game.
All right. Well, I think we've given enough disclaimers. Let's just get back to it.
Okay, sure. So maybe the best place to start is with the Frenzied Flame, because you made 2 great videos on the Frenzied Flame, and it was very creative and somewhat risky, I think. But I really enjoyed that, and I think you absolutely nailed what the Frenzied Flame is about, and this idea of life is suffering, and the suffering is so bad that no one should ever have been born. I think that's kind of fair summation.
Yes.
So I totally agree with that, but I think there's more to it. I think that fits into a bigger picture.
Right.
Because one way you could look at this is, what's the opposite of that viewpoint? Maybe the opposite of that viewpoint is, yes, life is suffering. You sort of can't avoid that fact, but that the struggle is worth it.
Right. That's the point that Melina posits to you. Exactly.
And there is all this interesting stuff about struggle. Like Gideon says, Marika has high hopes for us that we continue to struggle for eternity. And
right.
I think this also ties in with some of the talismans. But
yeah.
I want to. Well,
there's another example
that,
with Godfrey and the Crucible Knights, and his age was considered the golden age of the. I was actually reading some Miyazaki interviews this morning before this podcast, and he was talking about Godfrey, and his age represents a golden age for the Elden Ring and for the Golden Order. And it's looked fondly in this, but his whole thing was about struggle. The Golden Order was birthed in war, and it came out on top. The Erdtree became the symbol of order only through countless conflict. So conflict created this like golden age kind of thing.
Right, and they're just constantly in war. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So the reason I mentioned that sort of opposite viewpoint is because you have this weird. The frenzied flame is kind of a mirror to the greater will, right? Like the frenzied flame is about chaos, and the greater will is about order. You have the fact which the frenzied flame is yellow or goldish, which I don't think is accidental, because I think all of the colors in Elden Ring are very,
Right.
very intentional. And you have this thing about the law of regression and the law of causality,
Yes.
where the law of regression is the pool of meaning that that everything has this yearning desire to become one,
To become one,
which
yeah.
is right, which is very similar to what
Hyetta describes when she's telling you what's going to happen if you become the Lord of Frenzy.
right.
Yes.
We remove all distinctions, we remove all divisions, and if you think about the concept of order, like not in the game but just in general, when you order something, you're making divisions, you're distinguishing between things. Like
You're
if you have
categorizing.
yeah, exactly. If you have like a basket of laundry, right, and it's chaotic, it's just a bunch of clothes, and then you organize it, and okay, the shirts go there, the pants go there, socks over here, and you're distinguishing
You're
them into
dividing and
individual
distinguishing.
things.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
So, and this seems to be a really fundamental part of what the Golden Order is about, these two laws. So there, I don't know, that
Now that
seems
you
to be,
now that you've said that, it would explain. That's an interesting point. It would also explain why things that have been touched by the Crucible, which I posited is that the kind of how things were before when everything was one, and things that touched by the Crucible, they like grow horns or they grow wings like the Misbegotten, or scales where they shouldn't have any, and so it's things that don't fit neatly into a category, and so the Golden Order doesn't like them because they can't categorize them correctly. That might
right, or even maybe those who live in death, that it's sort of, they're between states. They're not,
Yes.
they're not dead or alive, right? So there's
Yes.
that whole idea of that you need order, you need things to be divided, and then the frenzied flame is sort of a mirror to this. And it's not ever explicitly said that the frenzied flame is an outer god itself, right? The only mention of this is, I think it's Miquella's Needle, which says that it wards off the intervention of outer gods, and if you've been, I can't remember exactly the wording, but it says something like, if you've been afflicted by the flame of frenzy, then you would be wise to seek this. But if the frenzied flame and the greater will were somehow part of the same thing or tied together in some way, then that would also
makes sense.
kind of make sense. Yeah.
That's what I posited in my second video. Yeah.
Right. So there's another way, and by the way, I know we can get to the alchemy stuff, but this is all it's all of a piece, and the
No, yeah, I'm
connections
listening.
here are
I'm
like all
very
over the
interested.
place. So
Yeah.
The law of regression, the law of causality, you have these like two opposite forces, pulling apart and pulling together. And I'll just sort of mention that, this is obviously, there's a big trope in Elden Ring of like doubles and twins and opposites and the sort of binary systems. And one other example that sort of resembles this is the Alabaster and Onyx Lords. So in my initial playthrough, I just sort of thought they were the same thing, but they're not. The Alabaster and Onyx Lords, they're both a race of ancients with skin of stone, but they use different weapons. The Onyx Lords have the Onyx Lord's curved greatsword, which is made of gold meteoric ore. And the Alabaster Lords have this Alabaster Lord's sword, which is made of blue-white meteoric ore. And the interesting thing about these weapons is that the skill for those weapons, the sort of Ash of War thing, the Onyx Lord's one does this gravity attack that pushes people away, and the Alabaster Lord's attack does one that pulls people in. So you have these sort of this kind of pulling together and pulling apart, these two things represented through gravity. And the interesting thing about that, I think, is that
one thing to make clear to the audience: the law of regression states that it wants to pull things together, everything to one. And the law of causality, I believe its effect is that if you get hit enough times, it pushes things back and does damage to them. So, yeah, that's another.
Right. It doesn't. The law of causality doesn't explicitly say anything about like pulling things apart exactly, but it says that it's the relationship between things.
Relate that. Right.
So, the interesting thing about this, there's two sort of interesting connections between the Alabaster Lords and the Onyx Lords, and this sort of golden example of these two laws. One is, did you see this video that Ziostorm came out with recently, where he mentioned, I think, some theory on Reddit that that Gold Mask looks like an Onyx Lord.
Yes.
And he's got a kind. I mean, I wouldn't say they're not identical. It's not the same model, but he kind of looks like one. And what's interesting is that
he does have a weird neck. He has an unusually large neck, like non-human large, I would say. So yeah, I could see.
Yeah,
that.
I mean, I think he's smaller than the Onyx Lords and a little bit more frail looking. But what's interesting about Goldmask is that he understands the law of causality. Which is this thing which sort of divides. It's the relationship between things. It's this pulling apart force of the Golden Order. And what you have to kind of teach him is the law of regression, because you find, you use the law of regression on the statue, which shows that Radagon is Marika, and you tell him this, and then he is sort of uncomfortable. He's struggling with this fact. And this...
Yes.
The sort of spirit that appear, you see him in this gesture with where he's like clutching his head, looks very similar to the people who are afflicted by frenzy.
By frenzy, yes.
So he's sort of like grasping this truth about something. He's grasping this law of regression, and he's afflicted with frenzy somehow. But then,
right.
So if he was an Onyx Lord, we can say that he understood the gravitational force which pushes things away, which pulls things apart.
So the Onyx Lord sword is the one that pushes things away.
Right.
Okay, that is interesting then. Okay.
Yeah, and so then by combining these two laws, he's able to craft the Rune of Perfect Order. The other interesting thing about the Onyx Lords and Alabaster Lords is that Radon was taught gravity magic by an Alabaster Lord. The ones that use the magic that pulls things together into one. And that's also what his the Star Scourge swords do, right? They pull things together. And what does he use this to do? He arrests the cycles of the stars. He stops them from moving. He stops their fate. He seals them. He shatters them.
Right.
There's lots of different words used. So, this is a little bit more speculative, but I think it makes sense. If you think about what fate is, because there's lots of references to fate, and it's very confusing. Fate is this idea that, like, the future is somehow predetermined.
Yes.
That there is a relationship between the present and the future, and it's this idea that...
Of causality.
Of causality, yeah. That things will sort of lead, like when you release the stars, through Ranni's questline, you're trying to get the Fingerslayer blade, and you can't get into Nokron, and it's almost it's like a mundane kind of problem. Like, okay, you just build a ladder high enough, you could get there. But for some reason, when you release the stars, and this is you're releasing Ranni's fate from being held in stasis, that
Yes.
this actually leads you into Nokron. So it's
Yes.
this kind of idea of like, you know, your path will lead you. You know, what's the expression of like, if you're going to die, then God will make it so that your path leads you to where you're going to die. I can't remember exactly, but this idea that
I
like,
get the deal.
yeah, so that fate is actually controlling events. It's the relationship between things
And
that
you can't meet your fate until fate starts moving forward, until the stars are released.
exactly.
Right.
And so Radon stops this from happening by using this pulling together force of gravity.
So,
So,
an interesting thing
uh-huh.
is, I don't actually know where I saw this, but I must have been watching a YouTube video, and I saw someone in Nokrom before they killed Radon. I don't know if they glitched their way there or something, but they were in Nokrom before they killed Radon. And they went over to this chest where the finger slaying blade is. And if you try to open the chest before Radon dies, the chest says that it can only be opened by someone who has a fate. Okay, and so implying you don't have a fate. So I don't think you're actually supposed to be able to go to Nokrom without killing Radon. But
I think actually that also happens if you kill Radon without progressing Ranni's quest line. So if you if you
okay.
kill Radon and go into Nokron, but you don't ever talk to Ranni, then that message
Oh,
will also appear. So it's somehow
okay, that makes sense.
tied to this idea that like, and you
Okay,
know,
so that might
Blythe
be tied to Ronnie's fate that the chest is talking about then, because it's her fate to get the blade can only be opened by someone who has a fate.
yeah, it could also be Blythe mentions once or twice, I think, that like your and his fates are intertwined, and I think
Mm,
EG says something about that as well. He didn't expect your fate to lead you here, something like that. I'm not remembering clearly, but
right.
I don't know. To me, that's just so this idea of fate being somehow maybe the relationship between the present and the future, the sort of
Yes.
relationship of time, because you know, in Dark Souls, there was kind of this implication that like the age of ancients, that there was no time
Yes.
because everything was sort of static. It was unchanging. It was formless, and that means
Right.
that there's no time. Um, and maybe dark as well. I still don't really understand Dark Souls lore, but um, uh, if you imagine that you put everything together and there's like no distinction between anything, there's no causal relationships between things, then maybe there wouldn't be any time either, because there's no, you know, time. We sort of track time in how things progress from one state to another.
Okay.
And if there's no transition of anything, if nothing ever changes because it's all this formless one chaos thing, then maybe there's no time. And that seems to tie in with the ancient dragons and the fact that Placidusax's seat is beyond time, and the scales they slightly twist time. Where that goes, I'm not entirely sure.
Okay.
But so the I just wanted to get this frenzied flame thing out of the way, because I think I want to see where maybe people will take that, because I'm not entirely sure where that goes. But maybe we can get into the alchemy stuff then.
Sure. One more thing about the frenzied flame that I didn't mention, and I feel like maybe I did mention it indirectly, but so the frenzied flame wants to pull everything back together, make everything one. It sounds a lot like what the law of regression is talking about. It sounds a lot like what the crucible is talking about, the primordial form of the earth tree where all life was blended together, I believe is the descriptor it uses. And so a crucible is an ordeal. but it's also like a I think I showed an image of it in one of the videos. It's like a little pot thing where you melt things, typically metals, and you mix them together. And you mix them together in the hope of creating something new with the mixed stuff. And so the fact that it usually mixes metals is interesting because gold is a metal, and it's mixed with other things, which I think might be associated with the idea of unalloyed gold, which means it's not mixed with something. I'm just throwing associations that I've noticed, but I don't have.
Yeah, and a crucible also is, it's usually this sort of, like you said, a sort of pot or bowl like thing, which
Right.
looks very similar to the thing that holds the flame of ruin on the mountaintops of the giants.
Mm-hmm.
And you mix these things together over a very, very high heat, over a very hot flame. And
Yes.
fire in Elden Ring, you know, in Dark Souls was all about fire,
Yes.
but it's strange. In Elden Ring, there's like, I think I identified possibly as many as 11 different types of fire. But
11 is very high. Like I counted,
I think some of
counted a
them are the
few
same.
as well, but 11 is a very high number.
Yeah, I think some of them are the same, but
Okay.
I just wanted to sort of be as discriminate as possible.
I mean, because
There's
I caught the yellow flame, the black flame, fell god's flame. I suppose regular flame if that counts. Blue flame, I guess, from the blue flame torch.
there's the ghost flame,
Yes, and ghost flame, of course.
and there's also the Gelmir fire sorceries, which it's not clear if that comes from a different source or not.
And if
There's
we
blood
really want to
flame.
talk about it, then there's blood flame. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that is. They're already at 8. That's already 8 flames. Jesus, you're
Yeah,
right.
it's quite a few different types of fire. But interestingly, I think in Dark Souls, it was all about what fire was, like the properties of fire in comparison to what was not fire, right? So fire is hot,
Right.
it produces light, it's warm, and then there's the dark, which is sort of the opposite of this stuff. In Elden Ring, it seems to be more focused on sort of what fire does to something, which is, I think, part of this sort of alchemical connection, because you're subjecting things to different processes. So it's not really about fire itself, it's about how fire transforms something. Like with the Flame of Frenzy, that
Fire
like
is
if
tool.
you one of the things fire does is remove the distinctions between things. It removes the
Yes.
form and structure of something. Like if you put some logs in a fireplace, okay, they're individual logs, they've got this structure, they've got this form, and then you burn them and they become this formless mass of ash where it's all one chaotic mess. The alchemists actually called this the massa confusa, this confused mass. It's like this chaotic oneness when you burn something. And it's very odd in Elden Ring. I haven't seen anybody really talk about this. The fact that you go to the mountaintops of the giants and you get this flame of ruin, you sort of release it and you start burning the Erd tree. And nothing happens. I mean, like, you
Yeah.
still can't get into the Erd tree. Like, okay, so what was the point of that? And then it's only by releasing the Rune of Death that suddenly the Erd tree really goes on fire. It's ablaze. And the narrator actually says that black flames cover the Erd tree, which is odd because they look completely red.
The narrator does? What narrator says that? I don't recall that.
You know that when you release the Rune of Death, there's this like cut scene where you see like
Okay.
a bunch of people in the lands between. And I hope I'm remembering that correctly. I've got the text dump here. Let me see. She says black flames cover the. The Rune of Death is unbound. Black flames have devoured the Erd tree, and the lands between are shrouded by death's dark fate.
So that's interesting, but I suppose it doesn't look black at all, but it is true that the Rune of Death is associated with the Black Flame because the Black Flame used to get its power from the Rune of Death before it was bound by Marika.
Right.
So I guess it makes sense that it would say that, even though visibly it's very much not.
Yeah, and there's an interesting, I mean, Malekith's Black Blade attacks, they all look red. Like the magic, it looks
Yes.
red. And the Rune of Death
Yes.
itself, it's like this sort of red cross, which, by the way, looks exactly like, well, exactly is a bit strong. It looks like the sort of symbol of Marika, but with the semicircle facing down instead of up. And what that means, I have no idea. But it has this sort of red aura to it.
So that thing that you mentioned, Vati's latest video, he talked about that in that video. Also,
Okay.
just to mention, I'm very grateful that Vati credited me in the description. He tagged me in the description of that video, mentioned me because I guess he listened to my previous podcast, and it caused him to make some corrections at the end of his video, and he put me right there. It's like, oh my god, he knows who I am. So that was very nice of him. I thought his video was really well done. The only thing that I didn't necessarily agree with is exactly what you just mentioned. I'm not sure the Rune of Death looks anything like the ark that Marika is crucified on. I just don't see it. It's jagged, and that arc that Marika's crucified on is visible in the Elden Ring in the title screen in the logo. It's that top arc at the very top, and we know that the Rune of Death isn't present in that version of the Elden Ring. So I'm not buying that the.
Yeah, I mean, it's a loose connection.
Right.
I think so. We can talk about that a little bit, about some of the symbols. So, the symbol, the alchemical symbol for Mercury, is if you imagine the sort of classic symbol for female, right? It's like a circle with a cross connected to the bottom.
Yes.
The alchemical symbol for Mercury is that with this semicircle on the top facing up.
Ah, that's really interesting.
And if you look at Marika, whose name kind of sounds like Mercury, that's a bit loose, but she's always represented as this woman carrying this sort of semicircle above her head.
Yes.
And this is interesting because Mercury is a really, really important element in alchemy. It's so there's something called the three primes, the trio prima, which this is where there's lots of different versions of the same thing, but the three primes are always the same, but what they represent and what they do, there's different versions of that. So the three primes are sulfur, mercury, and salt. And there's this idea that these are in some way, like these make up all the poisons of the world and maybe everything in the world. It's sort of similar to the four elements, but in a more material way. And there's even this idea that mercury and sulfur can be combined to create salt. That salt is actually the sort of unification of mercury and sulfur. And that's interesting because of what sulfur and mercury represent. So sulfur is masculine, it's fiery, and it represents the soul. Whereas mercury is sort of, well, it's liquid, because it's literally a liquid metal, and it's feminine, and it represents the spirit or the mind, which are I'm simplifying a little bit, but those are kind of interchangeable in alchemy. And then by combining these two, you can create salt, which represents the body. And there's a kind of, okay, well, Radagon and Marika, you have a man and a woman, and Radagon's got this fiery red hair, and Mercury is also associated with sort of moving between states, because it's a metal, but it's liquid. So it's this thing that moves between states, especially the states of life and death. You have Marika as this Queen Eternal, and then she combines with this fiery-haired guy into one body. So that's kind of interesting. And then Mercury is also usually thought of as being the starting material for creating the Philosopher's Stone. So there's a lot of... Mercury is a really important metal in alchemy. Maybe we can get to that, actually. Sort of the creation of the Philosopher's Stone. Because
Sure.
I think that there's a lot of connections with that. One of the things... I guess I'll just say this first. Like, one of the things about Elden Ring, which seems to me important, is that there's this emphasis on understanding things.
Yes.
Like, Marika she wants to search the depths of the Golden Order.
Right.
And Radagon learned sorceries from Rennala so that he could become complete. There's this idea that, like, we want to expand our minds somehow. And even, like, the primeval sorcerers, where they're seeing past the wisdom of stone. And so there's something about understanding which is very important to this. Unlocking
That's
secrets.
that's another mystery too that I don't know if you have any hints to, but that wisdom of stone line always gets me, because there's like another item descriptor somewhere that talks about the Crystalians and how they are associated with the wisdom of stone, and they're very, very heavily part of whatever the wisdom of stone is. So I just the whole glintstone thing, the Crystalians and the glintstone, it's completely I don't know. I have no idea what any of that is.
I have some things that might slightly
well,
clear it up.
let's not get distracted. Let's stay on where we're at.
Yeah, it probably create more questions than answers. But to me, this distinction between the soul and the spirit is very important. You have this Devon and Darian. I think Darian is the one that you first meet. And it says very explicitly that they have 2 bodies, 2 minds, and 1 soul.
Yes.
And what this seems to mean is that, right, they never stand together and they never talk to each other. So it's somehow like only one of them can be active at the same time. That's what it seems to be. Maybe there's a different interpretation of that, but that's what it seems like. And in alchemy, the soul is called anima, and the spirit or the mind is spiritus. So there's this idea that, like, the soul, it's this thing which is kind of the essence of life. It's the thing which animates. It's connected to the anima mundi. It's the idea that, like, everything is part of the same divine whole in some sense. And, like, your soul, one way to think about it is, if you look at religious traditions, like Eastern religious traditions that involve reincarnation. Okay, the idea is you're going to die and you're going to be reborn. You're going to be reincarnated. But you're not going to be reincarnated in your body, right? It's like a different body. And you're also not going to remember anything from your past life, usually. There's different versions of that. But you're usually not going to remember anything from your past lives. Like, you're going to have a different personality. In some sense, you're going to be a completely different person. So what is it about you that's being reincarnated? Maybe that's the soul. Maybe it's like this thing that makes you uniquely you, but it's also this part of this oneness, the divine whole, that the thing which connects everything in the universe. That's okay. I mean, this is a little bit. I'm going a little bit abstract and kind of drawing some inferences here, but just trying to figure out, like, what is the soul and what's the spirit. So the fact that the Twinned Armor set mentions this distinction between at least the soul and the mind is very interesting, because I think that you have all these weird doubles in Elden Ring. Like, you have Vike, you have Loretta, you have Godfrey, you have Godefroy, where they have these sort of spirits versions of themselves, right? Like Vike invades you, and he invades you, and he uses all these Flame of Frenzy things, and then you find him in I think it's the Lord Contender's Everjail.
Everjail.
In the mountaintops of the giants, and he's also there, but he doesn't have any of the Flame of Frenzy things. He only uses these dragon miracles, and he's called Round Table Knight Vike. So it's like there's this spirit form of him that's stuck in the past.
Yeah.
That's. I'm just saying it's like that. I don't know if that's what it is.
It is like that. Yeah.
And with Loretta, it's
her
the same
past
thing.
version. Yeah.
Right. And she doesn't use the spell which she learned after traveling to the Haligtree. She doesn't use that spell in Carrier Manor. So there's this sense that it's her past version of herself, and probably Godfrey as well, because when we fight the Golden Shade version of Godfrey, you can assume that he hasn't returned to the capital yet, so he's like not there really.
Right. Okay. It's a past version of Godfrey. Okay.
And then Godfrey, a lot of people have Godfrey is annoying, but a lot of people assume that he's a different person from Godric because he's got a different name, and there's this line about how he was captured by the Dragon Knight Kristoff.
Yeah.
Which seems to indicate, well, okay, if he was captured, then he can't be in Stormvale. Well, maybe not. Maybe in Elden Ring you can be captured, or part of you can be captured and sort of stuck in time. A part of your spirit, maybe. Because, I mean, Godfrey, he is Godric.
Well, let's...
Yeah.
His model is the same as Godric, yeah. Maybe we should leave Godfrey out of it, because that one, I think you were leading to somewhere interesting, but that one's left me very unconvinced. And but I feel like you were going somewhere, like you were leading up to a point. So maybe you should just tell me what the point is, and then we can go back to Godfrey and see if it fits in line with that.
Okay. There is this connection between spirit and memory, and you have the remembrances that are hewn into the Erd Tree. There's this. It seems to indicate that somehow the spirit form of someone, like a part of them in some way, can exist outside of themselves, and it is somehow stuck in time, or it's a memory of them. It's somehow some part of them is held, and there's also, by the way, the Ordina, the liturgical town, which is very weird, because you go there and there's all these spirits around, and then you enter the Everjail, and they're all physically there, and the Everjails themselves, they seem to be like, it's like the same place but a different place. It's like a different plane or something.
Yeah.
Like you're.
So the thing is, I almost agree with you, but there's like a couple of problems. So there's no animals in the Everjail version of the town, and there are ghostly animals in the normal version of the town, but you can't see any animals, as far as I remember, you can't see any animals in the Everjail version of the town. And
right.
the assassins are not in the same place, the archers are not in the same place. And I'm not 100% sure about this one, but are the ghost trees in the Everjail? Because I'd be convinced if you told me that the ghost trees were regular trees in the Everjail,
Oh, that's interesting. I actually haven't looked at that. Yeah.
I'd be 100% on board with that idea.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not even really, I'm not saying anything definitive. I'm just sort of pointing out these strange, sort of this division of, like, you have these weird places where there's a physical form of something, and then there's this spiritual form of something, the spirit form, and
Yeah.
they're somehow divided, and it's associated with time.
Time.
Okay.
Okay.
There is a spirit world in the Elden Ring. This is mentioned explicitly by the Helfin
what?
Steeple. So the Helfin Steeple says that the great sword is patterned after the black steeple of the Helfin, which is the lampwood that guides the dead of the spirit world. So there's this
Right.
explicit thing which says that there is a spirit world, and it also says that the lamplight of the Helfin is similar to grace in appearance. So this is okay. Like, what the hell? This is to me like the biggest thing in Elden Ring is this Helfin steeple, because
Right.
it seems to indicate that okay, you have this physical world where people are alive, at least.
Yeah.
Maybe let's not say physical and spirit, but you have a world where people are alive, and they're led by this golden light, golden grace, and that leads them. Well, it's kind of interesting. Where does it lead them? Because it doesn't lead you directly to the Erd Tree, right? It leads you on a path. It leads you out to your fate, essentially, right? It leads you on this path to go and collect great runes, and then maybe you're strong enough to go to the Erd Tree. But it's not like a straight line pointing to the Erd Tree, right? So it's somehow connected with. I mean, this is a bit of a stretch, but I think it seems to be connected to a kind of fate, and maybe the idea that in the age of the Erd Tree, the stars, people are sort of disconnected from the stars. The stars no longer govern their fate. This was arrested by the Erd Tree system. I can't remember the exact wording of that, or where that comes from.
So,
And
what's
sorry,
weird
yeah.
about this is that the lands between function like a kind of afterlife for the tarnished, because they were alive in the area outside the lands between, and they died, and they were brought to the lands between, and now they're guided by grace. Like they're the dead that yet live. Is the opening cutscene talks about. Marika mentions that you're going to go out there, you'll fight wars out there and outside the lands betweens, and you will die out there. And once you die, I will bring you back and guide you with grace once more, kind of thing, in one of her churches. So you're already in a kind of afterlife when you get to the lands between. And so there's like another spirit world on top of that.
Yes, it's very confusing why she needs them to die outside the lands between. I think there is a reason for it. So if you think about what grace is.
Well, hang on.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, because like that, you're starting a whole other tangent, and I feel like you haven't gotten to the main. Like you're throwing a lot of associations at me. But did you have a main point that you were using these associations? Because I was getting the feeling.
Well, okay, just this point that you have a spirit world. You have a living world which is guided by golden light, called grace, and then you have a spirit world which has these sort of tree things, these lampwoods, which guides the dead of the spirit world. But it only guides.
And it looks
can only
like
be
grace.
seen, and it looks like grace, similar
Right.
to grace in appearance. Possibly it's red colored because the Helfin steeple has this red jewel in it. So if that's symbolizing the lamplight, maybe the color's red. Maybe it's gold. Who knows? It can only be seen by those that met their death in battle. And this is kind of a strange thing. So this also kind of maybe ties the Helfin steeple. It uses the ability is that you cover the blade in ghost flame. And ghost flame is this weird flame that does magic and frost damage rather than fire damage, and it's sort of bluish white and black, faintly blue, white, and black. And this is associated with the deathrite birds, the death birds, and the deathrites seem to be about killing someone who is clinging tenaciously to life. Like they're really struggling to stay alive. And that's, for some reason, that's better. It's better to kill someone who is struggling to stay alive.
Yeah, the talismans, right.
The red-feathered branch sword and the blue-feathered branch sword. That, for some reason, that makes it you render a death worth offering.
There's something about struggle that increases the value of things. Like that's a consistent theme in Elden Ring, as we've been pointing out.
Well, and it increases the value. Yeah. Okay. So how does it increase the value of things? So it's so hard to like actually have a clear, logical step by step, like where I'm going. I'm trying to like jump around because it's all connected somehow.
Right.
So why? I think this is important to get where my thoughts are on this. That grace. What is the point of grace? It
points you to the major boss of the area.
Right. Well, it's the path. It's there to guide the tarnished. It's there to put you on the proper path. Those are both from item descriptions. And also runes are grace. Like when you pick up rune items, it says this is grace. Very, very explicitly.
The runes are grace?
Yeah, like just the normal rune items.
The rune items have in their description say that they are grace.
This is grace, yeah.
Okay.
So, and grace can be seen in the eyes as a golden colored hue.
Yeah.
And then also, when you drop your runes, like when you die, it appears as a little sort of tree thing, a little sapling. A little sort of spectral golden sapling. So what grace seems to be, it's guiding people to become Elden Lord. And if they die, if their grace, something that they, like their runes, their grace, can be absorbed by someone else. And that can be turned into strength. And you seem to have this system where, it's so hard to go one step at a time. Like, there's also this idea that people return to the Erd tree when they die. Like, honeyed rays of gold will deliver me back to the
Are you sure this isn't a different idea?
No, I think it's all connected. I feel my mind is
I thought you were just trying to lead to the idea that, you know, the grace is leading you to struggle. Like it wants you to be Elden Road, but it's leading you to struggle. It's causing you to fight other things that are full of grace, you know, that are full of the strength of the of runes. And, you know, the strength of runes is a thing. It's leading you to other things that are full of the strength of runes, because you need to because you need to. Struggle is what's required to become a lord. In fact, in the promotional material, that's what they talked about in one of the Marika's things. She's talking to the demigods, and she's like, make of yourself what thy will, be that a lord, be that a god. But if you fail to make anything of yourself at all, then you will amount to nothing but sacrifices.
Exactly.
Right, and so that's what you're talking about, I thought.
Yes,
and then on top of that... On top of that,
so that's
Godfrey,
the first point.
Godfrey, in his boss room, has a grace that's coming from him to you, the player. So he's got a grace guiding him from where he's positioned, leading him in your direction. So
right.
So you know it all fits.
Again, yeah, you're testing. Yeah, it's like a test. Who's stronger, and who is ever the strongest gets to become Elden Lord. And so you have this system which is sort of, it's aggregating all the whatever this grace stuff is, these runes, this power, it's aggregating it all and combining it, sort of refining it and distilling it into one person who might become Elden Lord.
Right.
And the whole reason that this exists is because the demigods couldn't become Elden Lord.
Right.
That's said in an item description.
Right.
So you have this strange system where it's, I think what this system is about is Marika needs someone strong enough to become Elden Lord for some reason. And so she has this whole Erd Tree system, which sort of locks people's spirits, maybe, their immortal essence, as Roderica calls it, into this Erd Tree system, so that all of that power, it's like this alchemical process. There's this there's something called a pelican flask in alchemy. One of the most famous images in the alchemical tradition is the Ripley scroll. And the first image in the Ripley scroll is this pelican flask. And a pelican flask, it's like a normal flask, like your flask of wondrous physic or something, except it's got these arms on the side. And the arms are for, you heat the mixture in the flask, and part of it evaporates. And that part condenses on the top, and it feeds back into the mixture through these arms. And this is associated with this purification, this idea of purification. There's a sort of alchemical principle called solve et coagula, this dissolution and coagulation, that this is a really important, this is how you purify something, is by breaking it apart and putting it back together repeatedly, over and over and over again. And I mean, it's a stretch to say that this is what the Erd Tree is about. I don't know if I could say that, but it seems to me that the whole point of the Erd Tree system is that some part of people, their immortal essence, their spirit, is sort of trapped in this system, so that when they die, it doesn't escape in some sense. It's held in the system to be absorbed by someone else in order to sort of grab all that power and aggregate it into one person who can become Elden Lord. And that this is not something that always existed, that before the Erd Tree was here, that...
Hang on. I'm not sure that tracks, because Erd Tree Burial, it does keep what you're talking about, like it has them as ashes, okay? And you can summon the ashes, and that's but that's different than the remembrances, and it's different than
Sorry, Erd
the
Tree
other
Burial.
stuff. It's different for Erd Tree Burial. The thing is, I'm not sure that that's associated with. I'm not sure that has anything to do with becoming Elden Lord necessarily, because how would you get that to the person that's going to be Elden Lord? How would you get the spirit ashes, the spirit summons, to the Elden Lord to become the Elden Lord? It may well be a means to condense power in a single location, but I'm not sure it's necessarily about strengthening the Elden Lord specifically, unless you have something else that like at least one other thing that ties to that.
So I'm not totally following what you're saying. With the Erd Tree Burial is this idea that you have catacombs at the roots of the Great Tree, which is tied to the Erd Tree. And then
so this is what I'm saying. All of the things that mention Erd Tree Burial come from, like you said, powerful warriors who. Well, I'm not sure you said that, but I thought you implied that. You have all these powerful warriors. The guy that caught Godefroy, the guy that fought next to Radon, like these spirit ashes, the spirit summons that earned the right to Erd Tree Burial. Like they said, their exploits earned them the right. The guys that served Morgoth, the one banished knight that served Morgoth, they earned the right to Erd Tree Burial through their deeds. So great deeds is what wins you the right to Erd Tree Burial. Is what,
right.
So
some kind of strength of spirit,
yes.
let's say.
Yeah. So that's great and all, but I'm not sure how you're taking that and assuming that that strength is going to end up with the Elden Lord, because especially us, the player, it's almost by coincidence that we find any of these spirit ashes. It's not something that would come to us under normal circumstances, and I'm not sure how Marika would have planned this condensing of power to end up being part of the Elden Lord cycle.
Yes. No, I mean, it's a very good point. I don't think that the spirit ashes are...
Okay,
in
then
some
let's
way it doesn't seem to be the
the
real
power
like
that you're talking about,
essence of something. It's more like the memory, which may be a different
the
thing.
memory of it. Okay, but even so, the if
Yeah,
that's
no,
not the
no.
power that you're talking about, then what is the power that you're talking about? Is it the
So
runes? And
I guess we could say two different things, right? So you're getting runes from defeating people, right? And these are golden runes, and that you turn this into strength, and that these runes are somehow grace, and that the grace is there to guide the tarnished. Okay, so that's like one thing. And then there's the Erd Tree burial thing. And I agree, there isn't a strong connection that says that, like, that power, those spirits, come back into the system somehow.
it
Like,
might come back
feed
into the
back in.
system, but it might not come back into the Elden Lord. Is my only problem. Like it definitely comes back into the system because comes back into the Erd Tree. The Erd Tree has the sacred tears, and those were given out as blessings, symbols of the strength of the thing. So whatever feeds the Erd Tree, I'm assuming is good for the system. But I'm not sure it's good for the Elden Lord specifically.
Only, I think, in the sense that it seems to me like the whole point of this system is to produce the Elden Lord.
Okay.
It's driving at, like, okay, you're gonna get someone strong enough eventually if you this system,
Yes, okay.
this sort of cycle keeps running. And there's this strange idea. So, like, and this system didn't always exist, right? The age of the Erd Tree didn't always exist. You had something called the Crucible, and what is that exactly? It's the primordial form of the Erd Tree where life was once blended
Where
together.
all life blended together. Yeah.
Right. And before the age of the Erd Tree, death was burned in ghost flame, or the dead were burned in ghost flame.
Right. And I'm assuming
Okay.
the Crucible was before that as well. Unless you don't think so?
It's um
Because I mean, if all life is blended together, I'm assuming that that's at the earliest stages, like that
well, it's not clear. It's not clear whether it means that all life was, like, sort of created as one big mixture, or whether all life was blended together, like actively blended together, like it existed separately and then was blended together. It's not really clear
okay.
which one of those it means.
So you think
I
maybe
tend,
you think maybe
yeah, I tend to
there-
think towards that because, again, this alchemical idea of, like, you're combining substances and then you're distilling them and you're evaporating some stuff and you're removing bits of it and you're trying
and
to
out
get to
of that
something pure.
process came out the Erd Tree.
Well, and the eventual result of alchemy is, like, you're trying to get gold, right?
Right.
So, and you do
Okay.
this by mixing in these elements. So maybe
So that
we
is
should just
That's extremely interesting. Yeah. Okay. So maybe that you're saying that maybe the ghost flame and the ghost birds and those ages that talk about stuff like that had a period, and then the Crucible happened, and they were blended together, and then the Erd Tree arose out of that process in the Golden Order.
maybe. Maybe.
Okay.
It's so hard to say. The timeline is so confusing.
Okay, so this is super interesting, but I feel like I gotta. I probably maybe I should have put this up earlier, but I'm just gonna say this out here right here. So I agree with a lot of these associations that these are actually really excellent, especially the one about the early ones about Radon and the causality. These are great. So here's my problem I've always had with alchemical interpretations in anything, and you're absolutely right. The alchemical interpretations are here. The associations are clear. But I had this issue even in Dark Souls 1, and Dark Souls 2 and Dark Souls 3, because there were people that would make these alchemical associations back then too. And just seeing from Elden Ring, they were right. They're absolutely right. There was probably symbolism that Miyazaki borrowed from Alchemy and put into those games. Here's the problem. I watched this video by Matt Durrott, I've only seen his Dark Souls videos, and he's talking about the prima materia, he's talking about alchemy, he's talking about that stuff. And I talked about before the game came out, I talked about the Rebus and how you had that opening scene where Marika and Radagon are smashing the ring, the very first trailer that we see. And I came out before the game came out, and it's like, look at this scene. She looks like a man in this scene. It looks like a woman in this. This is clearly the divine hermaphrodite. Something is going to be about this divine hermaphrodite. This is about the rebus. And when it showed it again in the thing, I have it on stream, me talking about that. But the way that I see, the way that I interpret, like, okay, the frenzied flame example that I gave in my thing is a good example. There is a theme to this, and the themes are the parts of it that matter the most to me. So the associations that we find that point to that are allusions, maybe, or that are borrowing alchemical imagery, need to then point to whatever the theme is. They have to, or they won't make any sense.
Agreed. Yeah.
And so the problem I've always had with alchemical interpretations is that people are like, look, this is so clearly like the divine hermaphrodite. Look at the eye in the fire giant. It looks like this thing in the Ripley scroll, or
Can I interject there? So
sure, go ahead.
It's a great point. And so something like that, the fire giant's eye, which has this central circle with 8 circles around it, and then this is the image in the Ripley scroll. That, to me, it tells me that Miyazaki saw the Ripley scroll, or I don't know, maybe Yui did or someone, but probably Miyazaki. But it doesn't say anything about the game. So yeah, I completely agree with you that, like,
well, it's maybe it does. Maybe it does say something about the game, because here's the thing. What I need from these kinds of interpretations is that, okay, you point me to the fire giant's eye and you point me to the Ripley school, and then you tell me, okay, in alchemy, this part of the Ripley scroll where it shows the fire giant is showing this thing, and then use that imagery, use the symbolism in the outside world that the game's borrowing, and then point that back into the game to come to a conclusion. What I'm looking for in this kind of thing is that like, I really don't remember. I'm not trying to insult Max Durrott. I'm really not. I don't remember what his video is about. I'm only remembering my reaction to the video. And my reaction was very like, okay, but so what? Like, you have to give me a conclusion. Like, you can't just give me the associations. If we don't have a conclusion, we're spinning our wheels. I can tell you that the thing looked like a rebus beforehand. And I'm like, you have to say, I'm not trying to insult you. It's just that associations are great, and this is very useful. This is eventually, I'm feeling that if I get enough of these associations, something will trigger in my mind, and I'll be able to come to something definitive, because I feel like I really understand the Flame of Frenzy. That's the kind of level of understanding that I would like to get, the thematic level of understanding that I would like to get to some of the other parts of Elden Ring that I'm feeling kind of lost. So I just wanted to throw that in there. Maybe you're leading up to a conclusion, or maybe you're leading up to...
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, it's funny. I've been trying to be very careful about not leaping too far. And so,
right.
Part of it is that a lot of the stuff I'm saying, I'm just sort of putting it out there and see if other people kind of make the same connections.
Right.
The conclusions, I mean, there's almost nothing about this game that I'm sure of. Because, even the item descriptions, they often say things like, oh, perhaps this, or it's rumored that such and such.
Yeah.
And
yeah. They lie a lot of the time. They just straight up lie a couple of times.
Right. So it's so... I've never been more unsure about...
Yeah, me too.
about anything in FromSoft games. So that's part of it. And so, like, when it comes to...
one thing that I found kind of funny is that Miyazaki said in an interview that he was more straightforward in this game than he was in the other ones. And I suppose in, like, the clear what's happening right in front of you, maybe a little bit he's more clear, more straightforward in it. But I've never had this level of doubt in my Dark Souls interpretations. And maybe, like, I'm being biased because I've had, like, 10 years to think about Dark Souls, and have a wealth of things, and we had DLCs to extrapolate and so much content. So maybe, like, I'm lying to myself thinking, no, I always had it down. Like, I always understood it really well. And it actually was just as confused in Dark Souls as I am in Elden Ring. but I don't. It don't feel like that. I
I
feel
don't
like
think so.
I
Yeah.
feel like when
No,
I'm over here and I'm trying to interpret Marika's motivations, like her deepest motivations, I'm like I'm missing something. I need someone
yeah.
needs to tell me.
No, no, I totally agree. I mean, I think it's funny to say this in hindsight because if you'd told me this when I was first playing Dark Souls, I would have laughed. But I think in hindsight, like Dark Souls 1 was an extremely simple story. Yeah, I mean, compared to Elden Ring, Elden Ring is it's a way more complicated mosaic of different characters with various motivations, with various names, with various different forms of them, with the like individuals are not clearly distinguishable in Elden Ring. That makes it really hard to figure out what's going on. If you can't tell
Yeah,
who a person, like if a person is a single person, that makes it really difficult
yeah.
to figure out the narrative. So, in terms of like, okay, do I have some conclusions from some of the alchemical stuff? I mean, the point of
If you
alchemy.
don't, that's fine.
Well, I have. I don't even want to call them conclusions, but I do have some things that I feel are close to accurate. Let's put it that
Okay.
way. I feel like they could be refined, but it does seem like the Erd Tree Golden system, Marika's system, whatever this is, it used to have fire involved.
Okay. And
And
it was banned, like it's banned to burn the earth. It's a
right.
cardinal sin. It's removed from the cycle, whatever it is.
And yet, people see the flame within the faith occasionally. They
Yes.
see that they have this
Yes.
sort of prophecy that, and there's, eventually you do have to burn the Erd Tree. And I think this ties in with the whole idea of, like, what your video on how all the FromSoft games are about how everything rots. It seems to me that, okay, here's my conclusion. You could agree or poke holes in it. I have doubts about it. But my conclusion is that Marika removed fire in some way from this system.
Okay.
And that in doing so, the reason to do that was to purify and distill some kind of immortal essence of people as this gold spirit, which would then aggregate in someone who could become a strong Elden Lord to birth someone that could become the new god. But in doing so, she caused things to sort of, because there's no fire to burn the growths anymore, there's unimpeded growth happening in places that there shouldn't be. So
Like what's an example of an unimpeded growth that's happening?
I think the aspects of the Crucible, for example,
Right.
and I think the death root as another example. Although that's also more complicated because that has to do with Godwin and there's more stuff going on there.
What's interesting is that the death root might tie into what you're saying, because that is also an example of Marika removing fire from the tree, removing fire from the ring, because the rune of death, which was once part of the Elden Ring, was removed by Marika, and Black Flame draws its power from the rune of death.
Right.
So that's just another example of her taking fire out of the equation.
And I think maybe the Flame of Ruin was also connected to the Black Flame somehow. I mean, you have like
Because
the fire monks.
it is weird. Yeah, it's,
Right. So you start burning the Erd Tree, but it doesn't do anything, and then you have to get
Yeah.
black flames to burn the Erd Tree from releasing the Rune of Death. So that's weird.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the fire monks who were denizens, or no, I'm using the word denizen. It's not from an item description, but they were guardians sent by the Erd Tree, like people, presumably Marika, to guard the flame, to watch over it. But then some of the
Yes.
fire monks become attracted to the taboo black flame.
to the Black Flame. Yeah.
So, like, there seems to be some connection there.
The
fact
that's
that-
I think it's undeniable there's some connection between the regular flame and the black flame, not just because Like where would the normal flame monks even come up with the idea of the black flame if they're like it's very
Right.
strange.
Where have they seen it?
Yeah, where would they have even seen it other than um and the description is kind of odd because the black flame monks their armor describes them as having been seduced by the black flame out of fear for the flame of the fell flame out of the red.
Right. They ran away from the flame of ruin. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
like,
It's
I'm
and
like
then
banging my head up against the wall. It's like, what?
who's the fell god? I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do think so. Like in terms of the big picture, you have Marika, and she's the eternal Queen Marika, right? We don't know when she's called that exactly, and she seems to be somehow connected with the Numen,
Yeah.
who are also probably connected with the Eternal Cities, right? Like the Black Knife Assassins were scions of the Eternal City.
So,
There's a various
so
thing.
one thing about that, Roger does say that they're scions of the Eternal City, but and you do find Numen runes in like the belly of those ants that have a bunch of honey. Like if you kill them, they all have Numen runes. If you blow them up,
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
and those runes, those bellies are golden. Like they're yellow in color because that's their belly. But that's the only place you find any Numen. The actual Nox sisters are all night folk, which is also a race that you can choose in the beginning.
Yeah. It's what the connection is between the Numen and the Nox
And the Eternal City. Yeah.
and the Eternal City. I'm not sure about that. I mean, one thing is that the Numen are said to come from outside the lands between, and one interesting thing about that is
That too,
that
yes.
like the Eternal City is not. I got to remember where this is from, but I believe it's not referred to as being part of the lands between. Like it's something separate from it.
Right. And it's
I
called
have
the
to-
Eternal City, which maybe connects it to Marika.
Marika the Eternal, yeah. And
And they were
and also
punished by the.
her
No, go ahead.
hammer was made in the lands of Numen.
The hammer. Okay.
So she's definitely connected to the Numen, and there may be some connection to the Nox and the Eternal City. Okay, and this is somehow the Eternal
Okay.
Cities. They had like a dark moon, which was then removed because they provoked the ire of the Greater Will. So that's kind of
Right.
strange. And then what Marika does?
Do you think that they provoked?
Uh-huh.
Do you think they provoked the Greater Will when the Black Knight Assassins went and attacked the gods, the demigods? Do you think that's when they earned the ire, or do you think it happened before that?
I think it happened before that because you
Okay.
have the Finger Slayer blade, which
Right.
suggests to me that they killed some fingers.
They've already killed a finger. Yeah, at least
Yeah,
one finger.
a finger or two, yeah,
Yeah.
or three, or maybe five. Who knows?
Or-
But
yeah, or all of the
fact
two
that-
fingers on top of the towers.
and then you have the Finger Slayer blade. It resembles this sacred relic sword. They're like both made out of
Yes.
this kind of similar design. And the Elden Beast has a sacred relic sword, which is weird because where did he get it from? And also
that's-
the Elden
Well, that's clearly
Beast.
Radagon.
Is that clearly Radagon?
If you look
Maybe I
at the
have to watch the
cutscene where
cutscene.
if you look at the cutscene, the beast grabs Radagon and he pulls him under, and then when he pulls him back, that same head has the sword, and the sword has a rib cage at the handle, and the hilt is the Golden Order pose, Radagon's Golden Order pose. It shows two little hands, so that and it's two interweaving blades, Radagon and Marika.
Okay, so that's interesting.
And the
So
Finger
if that
Slayer
comes-
blade is also two interweaving things, but kind of crooked in a
Right,
dagger.
and it's curved, which
And it
also
is
makes me
covered in blood, which implies that they did kill a finger.
They used it. So
Yeah.
to the point of that, yeah, they used it at some point, and it's called a Finger Slayer blade, so we can assume they used it to kill some fingers. Although also there is this
Right.
the Elden Beast has this wound on its chest, which
That's true.
maybe they attacked the Elden
But
Beast.
it's
Who
also
knows?
kind of in the same location. It's in the same location where Marika was stabbed by that spear when you first see her. When you walk into the bathroom, she has a spear sticking out of her side. That's a similar color as the rune of death type thing.
Right. That's an
So that
interesting connection.
I believe that's where that wound in the Elden Beast comes from. That spear.
Oh, that's an interesting idea. Yeah. Yeah, I like that. That makes sense.
So okay,
Um,
this is
sure.
really interesting. I do want to get back to the associations because I think you get a lot more to say on that. But let's stick with Marika for a moment and and then we'll work on a timeline. But first, the end goal that you think that she's working towards is she wants to create this struggle. She wants to create a worthy Elden Lord. She very clearly says that to the demigods: make of yourself what you wills, Lord or God. But if you can't, you'll be a sacrifice. Kind of thing. She has Godfrey, and she sends Godfrey out to struggle when there's no more struggle in the lands between. The lands between, the Golden Order was birthed out of war. You know, there's this item description for the Erd Tree. It says, in the beginning, all life was opposed to the Erd Tree, or something like that. But over the countless wars waged, it became the very symbol of order. So the Erd Tree came out on top in this war against countless things. Godfrey beat the giants. He fought off the giants, beat them all in battle. He fought the Storm Lord alone, and I still don't think the Storm Lord is the monarch Hawk King. That I don't think so. I don't think so. I'm not sure if there's like another person that's a Storm Lord, but I just don't see it being that eagle. That's crazy. Um, I think maybe it was. It could be the eagle. It could be the eagle. I also think, but I don't see that there's any more reason for it to have been the eagle than it could have been maybe the dragon. The because he's referred to as the Lord of the Storm beyond time.
right. Yeah.
So it doesn't really matter, but I just don't
That,
see
that-
any more reason for it to have been the eagle that's talked about there.
I definitely don't understand that line, but Placidusax makes more sense to me because there's also, if I understood it, I feel like I would also understand why Placidusax was Elden Lord, but there's this insistence that Godfrey was the first Elden Lord, and that maybe this is
Right.
somehow to do with him being removed from time. That's
And
not
then-
something I
and then
understand.
you have to So Placidusax is missing two heads. He in his little talisman, you can see he has four heads. He's missing two of them. He's stony and he's wounded. He's was cracked, and it says that his god had fled. Okay, and so assuming that Godfrey did fight Placidusax, okay, this would make a lot of sense because what do we do before we become Elden Lord? Who do we fight right before then? We fight Radagon. We fight Radagon before that we can get our hands on the Golden Order. You know, we get our hands on the Elden Ring. We have to. He has it. So it would make sense that when Godfrey became Elden Lord, he had to fight the previous Elden Lord, which was Placidusax, and he has a similar wound, just as like Radagon has a similar wound. And when he says his god had fled, maybe it means it fled from him when he lost, and went to Godfrey, went to the new Golden Order. It's a possibility. Is all I'm saying, and it makes more sense than some random eagle on top of a hill.
Yeah, I think so. And I think there's this strange thing about red and gold. Like this is, with the Philosopher's Stone, the idea is kind of that like red is a condensed, purified form of gold. And you have all this stuff like the Crucible Knight set, which says, they have these like red tinted gold, like Ordovis's greatsword. It says it's close in nature to life itself. I think something like that. And it's it's primordial
Yes.
gold. And then you have the dragons, which the modern dragons and the dragon cult, they have these like I don't know if the modern dragons use lightning ever. But the dragon cult incantations, they're all this like gold lightning, whereas the ancient dragons use this red lightning, which is like much more powerful and much more pure. how that all connects, I have no idea. And maybe this has to do with golden amber being remains of ancient life, and I there's something going on there that I definitely don't understand.
Right.
As far as like the overall picture, though, I think there is this thing in the creation of the both the rebus and the philosopher's stone, which in different versions sometimes they have the same process, sometimes it's something different, where you have these stages where you burn everything, you reduce it to a formless chaos, and then you separate things into equal opposites. And these equal opposites are often called the Red King and the White Queen. It's associated with the sun and the moon. And then at the end, you have to conjoin these and sort of make them into one single object that's pure and doesn't change in fire. So what's interesting about Marika, I think, is that she has kids with Godfrey, and she has Godwyn, Moog, and Morgott. And like two of these kids are cursed. They've got these horrible growths on them. Then Radagon has kids with Renala. And they're all like super powerful. Well, I don't know about Rykard, but Radon was able to literally stop the stars. Right? And he actually did that in his youth. And one of them is actually chosen by the two fingers. Ranni is chosen. Now, we don't know for sure whether Ranni is the child of Radagon, because all it says that she's the daughter of Renala. So maybe there's some kind of virgin birth thing going on there. I don't know. But the point is that this union results in an
It never
Empyrean.
says that she was the child of Radagon?
I've looked for that. I've not found it anywhere. That she's
I could
explicitly
swear. I could swear I saw that somewhere. Okay.
I may have missed it, but
Okay.
I mean, that's not super important. I mean, well, it probably is super important, but not for the point I'm making, which is that this union of Radagon and Renala somehow results in an Empyrean. And as soon as Godfrey is sort of not useful anymore, it seems like, he's sent away. And Radagon, for some reason, breaks his vow and goes to Marika, and they have children. And the children that they have are really powerful, right? Like Melania and Mikola are, and they're both Empyreans. Even though they're both
Cursed?
They're both cursed in a sense that is, like, undying. Because Mikola he never grows, and Melania kind of grows beyond all natural form, right? Like this rot. It's like this uncontrolled. It's both decay and growth, right? Decay and rebirth. So it's your blood is rotting, and then you also transform somehow. And this has something to do with the butterflies, because Mikola puts himself in a cocoon, and there's the nascent butterfly and the Aeonian butterfly. So to me it seems like Marika sees, like, Radagon appears in the Lyurnian Wars, and he becomes a great champion, and he kind of looks like a fire monk. He's got that like pale skin with the red hair.
Yes.
And he learns sorceries from Renala to become complete, but he's also like this incredible Golden Order fundamentalist. So he's got like both of these, this faith and intelligence. And this union with Renala, who's the queen of the moon, produces an Empyrean. And then she like sweeps him up, because she's like, okay, I need those genes.
So one thing, you don't think that Radagon was already a part of Marika at that point?
I don't see any evidence for that.
So let me just tell you the one piece that I think I was on your side until a bit ago, and then I saw this and that gave me pause. So Radagon had, when he married Renala, the preceptor's hood says that when he married into the royal family, he commanded the preceptors to put this stitching over their mouths to make it clear that their family matters were to remain secret. Like, so he has a secret that he wants to maintain even back then.
Does
Okay.
it say something about family? I don't remember that.
Let me look it up. It's preceptor.
Uh,
Let me just look that up.
to don these masks to make it clear that all of their matters were to be kept strictly private. It doesn't say anything about family in particular.
All of their matters are to be strictly private. Well, yeah, it's same thing. Even better anyway. Okay, now if you look at the mask and you look at the mouth, the stitching that it's talking about is Radagon's symbol.
Right.
So that's the symbol that's on the Elden Ring title screen. You know, that's part of the Elden Ring. Maybe even as a kind of containing the Elden Ring in the same way as it is, you know, sealing up this mask. Maybe. Not sure about that yet. But the fact that he has secrets, like it's clear that he has secrets, and he wants to make sure, and he's sewn shut with golden stitching, you know, these preceptors are not to speak about all of their matters are to be kept strictly private, implies to me that he already has something he doesn't want leaking.
Yeah, I don't know that it's clear that it's his secrets, though. Or, I mean, he wants something to be kept secret. What it is not clear. One of the things, I mean, the only preceptor that we know is Seleucus. And he's slightly different because he's serving Ranni, or at least kind of serving Ranni. And he sells these carrion spells, and he sells these frost spells, these snow witch spells, which presumably is sort of taught by the Snow Witch or taught by Ranni, or who knows, it's connected with her. But the other thing that he does is he makes puppets. And a preceptor is someone that upholds traditions. If there is some kind of connection, this was my thought at least, that if there's some kind of connection between the Eternal City and the Carians, which I don't know if there's a direct connection, whether they're related or whether they're just studying them or what, that may, and the Eternal Cities, they practice puppetry, right? So that seems to me what the tradition that he's upholding is, this practice of puppetry. And if there was a secret that the preceptors needed to keep, that seems to me more in line. Why? I don't know.
Okay, so that's fine that the preceptors might have their own secrets. But the item description says that Radagon, upon marrying let me go look at it again. When Radagon married Renala, he ordered the Carian magic preceptors to don these masks. So they didn't have these masks before Radagon. And if it was something like the puppets, you know, that this was probably well before Radagon. If the Carian royal family had a relationship with the Eternal Cities, there's no reason for him to immediately, upon marrying Renala, tell them, I mean, what does he know about the Eternal Cities? Like, they're under Liurnium. He was a champion for the Golden Order. He just was in a war with them, you know. So it seems to me.
Yeah, I agree. It's
and why does he have a symbol? You know, why does he have the stitching that he makes them go? Why does he already have a seal? Like the Radagon source seal talks about this is a symbol. Why does he already have a symbol? Why does he already have this golden stitching that interweaves? If he's just some mere champion, and it helps explain the mystery of him being called back to Marika.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I mean, I don't discount it, and it would also line up with this sort of solve et coagula idea in alchemy, that like you separate and you recombine, and separate and recombine. This is a process, and so maybe they were originally one person, they separated and then they recombined.
Recombined.
They just seem to me to be really different characters. Like, they have different motivations.
They're not. They're obviously not of the same mind. They're two different, like just like Dee and his brother. They're two minds, but they share a body.
Yeah, but it is. I mean, it's much more distinct than Dee and his brother, right? Because like Dee and his brother, they both serve the Golden Order. His brother seems to be a bit crazier, but I mean they're both sort of in the same milieu. Whereas like Radagon and Marika, Radagon appears in the Liurnian Wars. He becomes a champion. He's got this like pale skin with fiery red hair, which is somehow associated with the fire giants. Maybe it's a curse of their kind or something.
Yeah, what is with that? Do you think that he's related to the fire giants by blood somehow?
That initially that was my thought.
Because the description of the locks, the whip, talks about how Radagon hated his red hair, and then it says maybe it's a curse of their kind. And, it's saying there when they just mentioned the fire giant and Radagon makes it seem like they're talking about both of them. Maybe that's a curse.
Yeah, I looked at the Japanese description for that, and it says perhaps it's a curse of the fire giant, which still doesn't make it clear whether the fire giant put a curse on him or whether the fire giants were cursed, and this somehow also applied to Radagon. But I think it has to do with the fact that the fire monks have pale skin and red hair, and the black flame monks have black hair and pale skin. And I think Radagon was just such a devout member of the Golden Order that he experienced this thing where sometimes people see flame within the Order, and that this led him to something like where the fire monks were. That's sort of I literally just changed my mind on that like 2 days ago. So I'm not totally convinced of that, but what that even means, I don't know. But yeah, I think he was just a Golden Order guy.
Right. So yeah, I find this particular mask description there's also I'll talk about this other thing in a moment, but this mask description I find it's too clear. Like, it's talking about he has a secret. He immediately gets married. He tells the preceptors that their matters are to be kept strictly secret. He has the seal already. There's a mystery of why the champion would be called back to marry Marika, and then the turtle Muriel, the turtle pope. He talks about Radagon, and he talks about, a sculptor was called from the capital to make a statue for Radagon. And when the statue, he saw the skeleton in Radagon's cross, and he put it in the statue. So the way that he says that made me think that he was called from Leyendil to Liurnia while they were still married, to get his likeness into a statue.
Interesting.
And in fact, that same statue is in Liurnia. It's in that chapel. It's also in Renala's boss room. It's right in the back, that same statue. You can't use law of regression on it, but the way that Muriel was talking about, like, why would Muriel have rumors about a sculptor that went from the capital to the capital to render his likeness after he had already left Renala? Well, he wouldn't. The
thing that makes me, I agree at this sort of secretiveness about it as well. Like, why would it be a skeleton in his closet? Why is this something that needs to be kept secret? I agree that is suggestive, but also, part of this that I don't understand is, like, when Radagon married Renala, they made this vow, which seems to be sort of important in some way, because it's significant that he broke it.
Yes.
And in doing this, they united the House of Gold, the House of the Erd Tree, and the House of the Moon, and that the Golden Order actually, like, changed. It allowed for this to be included somehow. I don't know what that means. So I feel like if I knew what that meant, then maybe I could figure out why the preceptors were.
I'm not sure, but I know that they've done that more than once. When the dragons attacked the capital, and Godwyn defeated Gransax and befriended Fortisax, the dragon cult arose in the capital, and Linceasax, or whatever her name is, became a priestess for dragon worship, and dragon cult was incorporated into the Golden Order, even though it wasn't part of it originally. And so they do that a lot. The flame of ruin is part of faith. It's part of Erd Tree worship. They see the flame in worship of the Erd Tree. So it's weird. They keep incorporating these outside things into the Golden Order already, and probably the Eternal City too, because before the Eternal City was underground, it was above ground, and it was fine with the Golden Order. So the Golden Order was around. The two fingers were around
Well,
the great.
it's not clear that it was above ground. It's just that it had a different sky, which could be something different. I mean, I think actually that relates more to the fact that they had a dark moon at one point, and then it was lost.
Okay, is that there's no
I don't think it says
that talks about it getting buried underground?
I think it just says that their sky was taken away.
That makes more sense than okay. Well, either way, the point I was making is that at some point they were in the good graces of the Golden Order. They're clearly a different culture. They're clearly something else. They have their dark moon. They have their whole thing going on down there. But they were tolerated by the Golden Order, much in the same way like the Golden Order tolerates so many things, incorporating them into itself. Much like how religions do over time. Like they
well, it's sort of strange because sometimes when people talk about the Golden Order, it's something sort of metaphysical, and sometimes it's more like an organization, and that line is a little bit blurred. It's not totally clear.
Yes,
like whether this is something that it's just sort of mundane thing, that a practical thing, something that exists where people are making up different rules, like dogma and doctrine of religion, or if this is something more fundamental to the nature of the world, like the nature of the Erd Tree system. So it seems to be kind of both.
One of the interviews that I read recently, just today, with Miyazaki, and he was asked about the logo, the Elden Ring logo. He's asked what that is, and he's like, and he was like, it's an abstraction. It's like it's not a physical thing, really. It's like it's like not even how the Elden Ring looks like exactly. It's how it looks like when the demigods use it to impose this specific rules onto the world,
Yes. So, and I mean, one interesting thing about that is, so the Elden Ring, like you look at that logo, the title screen one, and you've got this vertical line, which has 4 semicircles facing up of different sizes. And then you've got that crosshatch pattern, which is associated with Radagon. And then you've got this sort of central symbol with these circles, these 4 circles, 3 surround, sort of interlocking on a central one. If you look at the one in Farum Azula, the central circles, I mean, there's lots of differences actually, but the central circles, there's still 4 central circles. But they're not 3 in 1. They're 4 independent, like they're connected, but they're 4 evenly. Like if you just look at a picture of it, you'll know what I'm talking about. That it's 4 of them that are evenly distributed. And when you do like a Golden Order incantation, it's the 3 in 1 that you see in the sigil, the casting sigil.
Yes,
and you also see that in the Erd Tree sigil and the Crucible sigil. And you also see it carved into the archway on the Erd Tree. So that seems to track with this idea that like this is their order. Maybe Placidusax had a different order. Maybe those 4 rings,
order, and the Elden Ring looked different when those other rules were in place and applied.
Yeah. So, I did want to get to one thing, which was Ranni and Melina.
Oh goodness!
This is like this is like the Velka. Or no, that's actually the Gloamite Queen. This is like the Velka of Dark Souls. But I think we didn't
Hang
get
on,
into
before
it. Sure.
we
Yeah, sure.
okay, like let me actually just get everything out of the way before we open that second can of worms because we're already. So let me just finish what I'm. All right, so let me just get it all out there. So you're talking about Marika, and your assumption is that she wants to that her goal is related to struggle and how she wants you to go out and struggle and accrue power. She sends Godfrey out, gets rid of him once there's no more struggle to be found here, sends him and all the Tarnished, his warriors, which that's what the Tarnished are, they're the warriors and the descendants of his warriors, to go out into the outside world and fight more wars out there. And once you're out there and you're fighting more wars, you will be called back to the lands between.
Well, once you fight and you get stronger, and then you die,
And then you die,
then
yes.
you come back to the lands between, and that's important.
And one
I
of the
think.
interesting, yes, and one of the interesting things is that I'm not sure that all the Tarnished get called back to the lands between because the brother Corin, who makes your things, his cloth, his the prophet, he also prophesied that the Erdtree would burn. You know, he also prophesied that that's what he saw in his faith, and he was ridiculed and mocked, but he remained firm, and that was the reason he got called back. So they get called back to the lands between because they endured some struggle and remained firm, it seems, And so as a result, he's like, he doesn't doubt his faith anymore because that's the thing that caused him to be called back in grace. And another interesting thing is the grace can go away. Like the grace, Roger came in here and he had the grace, and he stopped being able to see it after a certain point after coming here, which is very interesting. Like it's being very selective with who people are being filtered out, just like you said.
Yes.
Okay, so the assumption that you're saying is that it has a lot to do with struggle. It has a lot to do with choosing an Elden Lord. So what you're thinking is that she planned the Night of the Black Knives alongside Ranni and Rykard?
No, I don't think so. I don't think she
You don't
is.
think so? You don't?
I don't think that was it. I mean, look, I'll put it this way: like, she wants people to struggle, and she wants to like filter and purify something about like people who carry this grace, this runes, until you get an Elden Lord who's strong enough. Why does she want an Elden Lord? Well, what does she do with Elden Lords? She has children with them, and she seems to be trying to get an Empyrean child. And
Why do you think she wants an Empyrean child? To replace her?
That's the only thing that makes sense to me. I don't.
So you think she wants to be replaced by an Empyrean?
I think she wants to. She's like trying to figure out what this whole Golden Order thing is, right? She's searching the depths and
okay,
like beyond what the Golden Order people find reasonable, and it's almost like an experiment. Like I think this is just sort of an alchemical process, like that. How do I give birth to something that's sort of pure, maybe, or perfect, and that this thing will maybe become the next god?
Okay,
that seems to me the direction of things.
Sure,
yeah.
Sure, okay, maybe. But what about? So you don't think that she planned she had a hand in the Night of the Black Knives? But
I don't really see why she would do that.
Yeah, okay, that is a confusing thing. But we know that the people that carried out the Night of the Black Knives were all Numen who were close to Marika. Like they had close ties to Marika herself. She took the Rune of Death and she gave it to Malekith, but she betrayed it. The Malekith description says something like she only had one use for her shadow, and that was to safeguard the Rune of Death. And yet, even though that's all she wanted from him, even still she betrayed him, implying that she orchestrated taking that rune away, like a piece of the rune away. you know, when he kills you or when you kill him at some point in the fight, he's like, Marika, why gull me? Which means why betray me? Why fool me? Why trick me? Thing. So he had the rune. Some reason he gets betrayed by Marika, and the rune gets taken. Unless you think that the betrayal is something else unrelated to the piece of the rune of death being taken by Ranni.
Well, he also says, why shatter? And he doesn't say shatter what. But he says, yeah, like, why would you betray? Why shatter? So it seems to be that the betrayal is her shattering the ring. I don't know why that would be. I'm not entirely.
So, okay.
Yeah.
So then let me just pour some more stuff. Marika, the Numen are Black Knight Assassins are Numen. They hang on. Black Knight Assassin are Numen. They have close ties to Marika. Melina has the Black Knight Assassin moveset. Okay, in her combat, she goes into the. She arrives at Leyendel. She can now move around, even though she's bodiless. She's burned and bodiless for some reason. She goes and talks to her mother in the Erd Tree, and now she knows her purpose. Okay, and whatever it is that her purpose is, she wants you to go and burn the Erd Tree. She's got to sacrifice herself at the Flame of Ruin, burn the Erd Tree, and then I guess sends you to Farum Azula. How do you get to Farum Azula? That's just always bothered me.
Well, that's the other part of it is like when that is the one thing that happens when you release the Flame of Ruin is that you just suddenly wake up in Farum Azula, which maybe it has to do with something about time that like
time.
Now you've broken something that allows you to access this place that's beyond time.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I see these connections to America, but they could just as easily be connections in like maybe she was a Black Knife assassin at one point who became this person. I don't see a clear line. Like I don't see the motivations. Yeah.
No. All I'm lacking is motive, but I have probable cause.
Exactly.
I've got a lot of probable cause. Okay, here's another one. How about this? When you go and you find your first wandering mausoleum, all right? Okay, this is what happens in the Night of Black Knights. In case people don't know about this, not only Godwyn and Ranni died, they were just the first. I in the Bandai Namco website, it talks about what happened. And it talks about how Godwyn dies, and then a bunch of other demigods all get killed. Countless demigods. Her power can't protect them all. They're all too scattered across the lands between.
They kill many of Marika's kin. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, they kill a bunch of demigods. So that's where all the wandering mausoleums come from. Those are the dead demigods. The ghost in front of the first one in the Weeping Peninsula that you probably see, first one you probably see, says, "Oh, soulless demigod, unwanted child of Marika." Okay? Unwanted, further implying that she had a hand in having all of these killed.
Right.
Too many. There's too many little things like that. You know, it'd be one thing if I had one piece of evidence and it was just that one piece and nothing else. But it's a lot, and they all a little bit point to Marika, and they're coming in different directions. It's too much. It's too much.
Before I address that, is it possible to just pause for a moment so I can use the bathroom?
I'll just we don't need to pause. I'll just edit this part out. Go ahead. Okay. We were talking about Marika
and the soulless demigods.
The soulless demigods. Just let me throw some more fuel on the fire. The demigods, her talk to them, she tells them, "My beloved children, you know, become a lord, become a god, do whatever you want, but if you don't, you'll become sacrifices if you don't manage to accomplish anything." How did the demigods get the shards of the Elden Ring? They just find them? Like she broke the Elden Ring and the shards just find them? I am not sure like this is the most speculative one I've said. All those other ones I think point to America in a somewhat clear way, motivation or not. We don't understand her motivation, but this one is more speculative. She could have given them to them after she broke the Elden Ring, given that to all of the demigod children that remained, that weren't killed. Why? Well, because she wants struggle. She wants the shattering. The shattering happens. They're fighting against each other in an attempt to become Elden Lord. They don't manage to become Elden Lord. And it's only until that point that grace is removed from them and granted to the Tarnished. Okay?
Right.
Marika controls grace because she told Godfrey this would happen. All right? Whatever else is going on, whatever the greater will is, and if she is aligned with whatever it is the greater will wants, or if she's aligned with whatever the Two Fingers interpretation of what the greater will wants is, that doesn't matter, because Marika is the grace controller. She told Godfrey that at some point she would bring him back to the lands between, and she did. She's the grace controller, not the Two Fingers.
What's interesting about that is that Enya actually says something different, which is that it's the greater will that gave the grace to back to the Tarnished. The greater will brings them back. So, which is strange because in the intro, the narrator says that the shattering led to abandonment of the greater will. So either Enya is taking poetic license, or she's untrustworthy.
Or the fingers are untrustworthy because the fingers, right. Their ability to interpret the greater will is damaged. In Gideon's item description of one of the things that he has, it says that in his long dialogue with the fingers, he attained true knowledge and realized that everything had been broken long ago, including the fingers and the Erd tree. So,
right.
So, either. Whatever the case is, either the greater will is in alignment with what Marika wants, or Marika, as the holder of the vision, I think that's what Enya says, the holder of the vision of the Elden Ring, the current holder, is the one that's controlling the grace. But I think it's very clear that she's the one that's controlling the grace and leading you Tarnished to each other, well, not to each other, to challenges, to struggle.
And so the idea would be that she wanted to sort of kill all these demigods to get that power, because they weren't going to become Elden Lord. They weren't going to become powerful enough. Is that the motivation? Or
I think that this was all planned. But I'm not sure if it was all planned by her, because we have that dialogue with Marika that Melina tells you about, where she's talking to Radagon, and she's like, Radagon, Leo Hound of the Golden Order, you are not yet me. So at this point, whatever the Golden Order is, it's not in alignment with Marika. Marika is very anti-Golden Order at this point, because Radagon is loyal to the Golden Order. She calls him the Loyal Hound of the Golden Order. Whatever he's trying to do, he's not yet one with her, and so he can't.
I didn't take that as being anti-Golden Order.
No.
I mean, she's just saying that he's a loyal servant of the Golden Order. I mean, that could be also a favorable thing. Like, yeah, you're a loyal servant of the Golden Order, but you haven't yet become a god yet. If Marika wants what you think she wants, which is to be replaced, she wants some new iteration of order, like a new vessel for the Elden Ring. Even then, it's not clear that the Golden Order would be preserved, because when it transitioned from the dragons to this age, the age of the Erd Tree, the dragons surely didn't call it the Golden Order. It was very different. You see all those different Elden Rings back there. I think Marika wants to kill Radagon. You know, when the Two Fingers send you off to do, you only need 2 great runes to repair the ring. Go over there, but what keeps you out? It's not Marika's symbol that's keeping you out of the door. It's Radagon's cross-weaving symbol that are on the thorns to the tree. So they're not in alignment. Whatever it is that one of them wants, agreed,
the other one wants. So Radagon's trying to keep you out, forcing you to go burn down the tree. Marika knows that. She talks to Melika. It was always she talks to Melina. It was always part of the plan to have Melina burn the tree down, to get into the tree. The fingers are surprised by this development, but Marika planned ahead. She wants to burn the tree down. She wants you to get in there. She told Hugh to craft you a sword, to craft the Elden Lord a sword powerful enough to kill a god. She wants that god killed, even if that god is her. I'm not 100% sure, but it seems to me that she wants to get Radagon out of the way and put you in charge. Not you necessarily, anybody, a new Elden Lord that isn't Radagon.
I mean, my sort of take on it, the main reason that I don't see her being responsible for the Night of the Black Knives, or at least if she was involved, it maybe more happened than what she expected, is that there is that, I think in the story trailer, which, you know, who knows if that's canon or not, it says that Marika was
absolutely canon.
Yeah, it says that the death of Godwyn drove Marika to the brink, and it doesn't seem like she would do something like that.
That's actually not what it says. What it says is that in the Night of the Black Lives, the demigods began to fall, starting with Godwyn the Goldwyn, and that's a period. And then it says Queen Marika was driven to the brink.
Oh,
that's a new sentence. So I'm not sure that the loss of Godwyn is what caused her to fall into grief and smash the ring, especially because she still has the wherewithal to plan for Melina to like, we're in agreement that she and Melina are in cahoots, right? And Melina,
right.
So she has the wherewithal to have Melina go burn down the Earth Tree, knowing that what even the Two Fingers don't know, that Radagon's going to keep the door sealed, not letting you in to become the new Elden Lord. So even as she's driven to the brink and smashes the ring, filled with grief with Godwyn, you know, I'm not sure that she planned the Night of the Black Knives. I
mean, actually, that's a very interesting distinction there. The point about the period, and I do see the argument for it. The only thing,
and the unwanted children.
The unwanted children. That's a big one. Yeah. To me, it seems like the Night of the Black Knives. I mean, maybe this is just part of it, and maybe Marika has her own part in it. So, but it does seem like Ranni specifically wanted to get rid of her body. She wanted to get rid of the sort of lively, animated part of her and become just a spirit for some reason. And this has to do with her understanding the Dark Moon, and also not wanting to be controlled. Like, her fate
by the Two Fingers
is tied to her body. Yeah, her golden fate is tied to her body, and her star fate is tied to her spirit. And that seems to be,
you know, that's actually interesting. That's really interesting that you said that, because that ties together very well with that potion that, what is it, Severus?
Celevis, yeah.
Celevis tries to make you to... Yeah, he's got Amber Starlight, which is said to be able to control the destiny of the gods. If he's using the regular Starlight to somehow make puppets, and that's controlling the fate of mortals, and this Amber Starlight might be controlling the fate of the gods. But Ranni's already cast away her Empyrean flesh. She's inhabiting a doll. And she did this presumably to not be controlled by the Two Fingers, to not be bound by her fate. And so that whatever order that she's making isn't bound not only to not just the Golden Order, but maybe even to the greater will at all.
And you know, I could say this really fast because this is a whole lot to this, but like, the ghost flame is also associated with cold, and one of the thing the ghost flame is associated with is the death birds, which are children of the twin bird, and the twin bird looks like a black bird on a red background, and a red bird or maybe a reddish orange bird on a blue background. And now in alchemy, those birds are, this is very, very consistent, especially for alchemy, which is very inconsistent often. Blackbird and the redbird always symbolize the same things, which are the raven and the phoenix. And the raven symbolizes death, and the phoenix symbolizes rebirth. And together, that may indicate something about, this can be interpreted as like freeing the spirit from the body. Like your earthly body dies. I'm not just saying this as like people have interpreted those in the past, those symbols, when you put the raven and the phoenix together, that this indicates that you're freeing yourself from your earthly body and entering the, I don't know, the astral realm, the spiritual realm, whatever. And this is also what happens when you burn bodies in ghost flame. That when you burn them in ghost flame, and it seems to be connected especially to burning their bones, that you release vengeful spirits. And so there's something about like existing in pure spirit form. And this, by the way, also I think ties in with Glintstone and Lusat and Azur and a bunch of other things. And I mean, yeah, there's so much here. Like the doll body of the Snow Witch that Ranni partially inhabits.
Do you think this is a good place to transition to Ranni and Melina?
Yeah, well, I think they're connected. I mean, they
Okay.
definitely seem connected. And my sort of speculation is that when Ranni destroyed her body, that sort of that vital energy of the body was reborn as Melina. And her mind, her spirit part, started to inhabit this doll. And that's why Melina doesn't really remember that much, because she like doesn't have a mind really. She doesn't have she doesn't know who she is really. And then when she gets to the Erd Tree and she gets closer to this whole system, she starts to get stronger and more sort of independent and realize her purpose. How that connects to her being like Marika's daughter, I'm not entirely sure what that means, except that maybe this is like very far reaching. Maybe she was reborn through Marika. Like she is Ranni's vital energy, her life essence, or part of it, reborn through Marika.
Well, this it wouldn't be so reachy, and it would make a lot more sense and still fit in your theory if we just accept that Radagon was already part of Marika by the time that he married Renala, and therefore she is Marika's daughter.
Yeah. 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 I guess that does. Yeah, that does work.
But I suppose that doesn't matter that much. But that is a really interesting idea, isn't it? I never would have thought of that. I'm really glad you brought that up. The idea that Melina is Ranni, but not necessarily her mind. It's her spirit, I suppose. Their body. Like if we take this three parts: the spirit, the soul, the mind, and the body as all separate things, and Melina doesn't have a mind because she's just something else.
Well, and again, that goes back to the idea of like spirits being kind of somehow tied with memory and time, and that like a spirit a memory can almost exist as a spirit, right? That's a bit of a stretch, but there's the remembrance. This is hewn into the Erd Tree. When you kill these bosses, like their memory is hewn into the Erd Tree somehow.
So Ranni, if Melina is a spirit, which one is Ranni? What part?
Well, I think the idea is like, yes, the soul and the spirit are separate, but they're both a kind of immortal essence of someone, and that it can kind of take either form. This is like, I'm just trying to
And
come
and
up with
and the
some
mind
explanation for
is
this.
what went with Ranni.
Yeah, because like you have these you have like Lusa and Azur, and they see past the wisdom of stone, and the Crystal Cadre was trying to understand the wisdom of stone, and this that has to do with the Crystalians, and the Crystalians, the thing about them is that they are inorganic yet they live. They're just like minds living in rock. And the glintstone sorcerers, they saw the body as being transient. Like they're only really concerned with the mind, and this somehow ties into like you. It seems like you can exist as just a mind, like maybe,
Right.
but this is tied with inorganic life in some way. But this gold stuff, so there's like the blue, the blue spirit soul stuff, is all to do with the mind. And then the gold and red spirit stuff is like, it's more vital, it's more wild, and it's connected to fire somehow, and it's more, and it's connected to the body more as well. It's like, it's living, it's very sort of primal. And that maybe Ranni sort of split that out of her. She separated herself and let that gold stuff go back to the Erd Tree and be reborn through Marika. This is like a I'm wildly speculating.
No. This makes look like it's not that crazy, but it also has more implications. I think in what I was saying before about America being involved. But let me put that out of the way for a second. I don't. There's no way for me to accept that Ranni and Marika aren't connected at all in a deep way. The ghost on Ronnie's thing looks exactly like Marika, just like exactly like the moment that I saw.
No, you mean Melina?
Yeah, Melina. The moment I saw that ghost, I'm like, well, that's just Melina.
Right.
It has the opposite eye closed. Ranni has the opposite eye closed as Melina. You can put their two faces together. It looks exactly.
Well, her spirit has the same eye closed. The doll body, which is a representation of the Snow Witch, has the opposite eye closed. And actually, the eye she has open has a blue-green hue to it, which is different from the blue hue. And the other person who has blue-green eyes that are very distinctive is Roderica. And Hugh mentions that he saw that hue in another spirit tuner long ago, and he owes a debt to her. And presumably that was the Snow Witch.
Yeah.
The Snow Witch has had a spirit calling bell,
Yes.
and she had 4 arms, which probably means she was of the same race as those wraith callers, and they also ride around on little horses. And the former master of Torrent asked Ranni to give you the spirit calling bell. So there's something about, like, I think this Snow Witch, who understood the Dark Moon, she could see something about spirits. She understood something about spirits that very few people do. And Roderica is another one who understands this. And Roderica says that she now sees, at one point she says that she now sees how immortal essence could survive as spirit, or survive is not the right word, could live as spirit in the Golden Order. What exactly does she say?
that
Immortal essence. I can see how and why immortal essence exists as spirit under the Golden Order. And there's this implication that, like, well, immortal essence can exist as something else. So maybe that's the mind. Maybe
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, but you realize, of course, that this just puts more credence into my Marika planned everything theory. Because Melina, from the moment she wakes up, wants to go talk to Marika. That's her main thing. She's like, take me to Marika. Ranni knows that Melina's with you. Like, she knows Torrent. She's like, look, Torrent, there's Torrent. Let me give you the spirit calling bell. Either she knows that Melina is with you, or there's some kind of direction that's, or like, all this is planned out. Because Marika knows that Ranni knows that Melina exists, separate from Ranni in the first place. Melina's instinct is immediately to go to the Erd Tree. So even if she doesn't have her memory, she's still being a part of the plan. And Ranni still needs the Erd Tree burned anyway, because even if you go with her ending and she finds a way to succeed in freeing herself from destiny, she still is going to need to burn the Ur tree to start her
Right.
age anyway. So, and Rykard has his own plans, but Ranni helps him. So like they all have their own plans, but she gives him the piece of destined death as a last resort, so he can go fight Malekith in case everything else fails. Like it's a last resort. So they all like, okay, as long as it's not the normal stuff. Like as long as
Right.
it's like, yeah. So it just seems to me.
I mean, what one possible interpretation here is like, it seems like Ronnie was at one point more favorable to the Golden Order because she actually has a seat in the throne room, right next to all the other demigods, and that she, like, at some point she rejected the two fingers, but that indicates that maybe she didn't always. So one possibility is like, when she rejected the two fingers and carried out this Night of the Black Knives, the part of her that was favorable to the Golden Order was actually sort of maintained in the retreat. This is why. I mean, I'm just kind of spitballing with that, but
right.
I agree that, I mean, it would make a lot of sense if Marika is.
We just don't have a good motive. Is the only problem.
I mean, the only thing I can say about the motives of Marika is that she wants people to struggle, and this seems to be because in struggling they get stronger. And when they get stronger, this sort of aggregates and you get someone who's an Elden Lord. And when you get an Elden Lord, she has children with him. But when the Elden Lord's children aren't right, she gets a new Elden Lord. So the whole motivation.
But she already
seems
has
to be,
several Empyreans. Like there have been Empyreans before. Like there
right,
was
but
already...
they're all kind of not right. You know, like Mikola and Melania are cursed, and Ranni rejected this. There's like something. It seems to me like she's trying to create some like perfect being.
But the curse that Mikola and Melania sustained happened because Marika and Radagon were at that point already merging. Unless you think that's something else.
Right. No. That actually, and I looked at the Japanese for that description. This, I think, clears up something about the Empyrean. I think, I'm not fluent in Japanese, but I think if I translated it correctly, the English says like, Melania and Mikola were born of a single god, and as such they were both Empyreans, and their lives were frail. But I think the emphasis in Japanese is that they were born from the spirit or the god of one person, and because of that, the important thing is that their lives are fragile, and also they're gods. Yeah. They're Empyreans.
I figured
it's not that. Yeah, it's not that because they were born from a single god they're Empyreans. It's because they were born from a single god they're frail. They're fragile.
That they're frail. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That is what I figured. So yeah, I think we're basically in agreement. She wants to struggle. When you get Gideon Ofnir's armor, it says in his armor set something along the lines of when he understood Marika's motivations, he shuddered in fear. He's like a lorester. He's us. He's a lore. He's trying to figure everything out.
Exactly.
He shuddered in fear at the end, which should not be. What do you think that's referencing?
Oh boy. Yeah, that's a good question. Is what I'll say about that. I mean,
because
he also
if he understands Marika's motive.
He also says another thing which is very confusing, which he says he knows in his bones that a tarnished will never become Lord. But then, like, you do. So
I guess
he's just wrong. And
it's those two things. It's those two things that I sit here and I think about those, and those are not accidents. Those are very intentional, which makes it very clear to me that there's something missing. And I think it might actually be impossible to get. In Dark Souls 3, I don't know if you ever saw my video that I made before that video that you referenced, the reoccurring theme. where I
Yeah.
talked. I had my earliest lore video that I made in Dark Souls. I talked about how I thought fire was civilization. I had it all down. Talked about order and chaos. I think if people went and back and looked at that, having played Elden Ring, I think I'd be very vindicated by a lot. I think a lot of people are like, okay, he was onto something because a lot of the same terminology that he's using to describe it is being used in Elden Ring way
Oh,
before the game came
absolutely.
out.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think
So
it's in some ways Elden Ring is very different from Dark Souls, but it's playing with the
yes,
same ideas. It's playing with the same ideas. They're just told in a slightly different way. I mean, there's definitely the sort of themes of continuity and how and the cycle of life and death and struggle and how you deal with that and how you don't want to extend anything to beyond its natural point.
yeah,
Like I think all of that stuff is there, and I even think this sort of, you had this video about the painted world being a kind of metaphor for Miyazaki trying to create something new and not just keep on doing Dark Souls. And I think there is a kind of meta commentary in Elden Ring as well. Like what you were saying about Gideon Ofnir, that this whole search for lore, like this trying to understand the mysteries of the universe.
he's always
trying to
making fun
understand
of
the
us,
secrets.
specifically you and
Yeah.
me. Like he in every game he makes fun of us specifically. Like he go it was the Simon the Bowblade guy in Bloodborne. He's like, looking for secrets, I see. It's
Right,
like
right.
it's
Or
like
the
that's
wooden
it.
shield. Yeah.
Or
The-
Vilheim, I think in the Ashes of Ariandel DLC, he's like, there you go again, looking for secrets. Every
yeah.
fling must be caught. Every truth unearthed.
Yes. But you
It's
don't
like
have the
he's just
stomach
talking
for
to
it.
us directly, the player, the lore hunter people.
I think there's a big element of that, and I mean I don't know that that's primarily what Elden Ring is about, but I think he definitely had that thought. Like, you're making this game where there's this huge emphasis on trying to understand how things fit together and how you like divide things apart and put them back together, and like the connections, the relationships between things, and
Yes.
everybody's trying to figure out what's going on, and like create some grand theory that encompasses everything. And that's literally what you do at the end of the game, is like you choose how
Yes.
you want the world to exist. What you think the best option is. So
There's a great deal about Gideon Ofnir that just reminds me. Like I really think that he was thinking of lore people in particular, because there's this thing where he's talking about Miquella, and he's like, Miquella, that's the one thing the one missing piece of the puzzle that I still don't have. And I'm sitting here, it's like, yeah, me too, bro.
right. Yeah, I think that's right. And I think his scepter says something about like that knowledge. You're always grasping for knowledge, but you can never attain it. So yeah, there's some stuff like that. I think
And he
it's,
knew that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here my problem with the America wants people to struggle. That's clearly true. I think you're on the right track, but I don't think that we've hit a conclusion that's satisfying for me yet, because Gideon Ofnir saw some end that should not be. So whatever it is that he wanted, or whatever it is he realized, was something that caused him to shudder in fear, something that caused him to not understand, like to be afraid of Marika's will, and some kind of end that's happening that he didn't want to happen, an end that should not be. So all of that's implied in that piece of text, and nothing about what we've been talking about so far seems to fit the bill for that kind of reaction from Gideon, for him to know in his bones that you can't a man can't become a lord. Doesn't make sense. I don't get it. And so I sit here and I think about my video that I was talking about in Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3, and I made that whole point. And I was like, would I really have been able to make that video without Dark Souls 3? Would I really have been able to make that video without the Ashes of Ariandel DLC? And I'm starting to think, maybe no. Maybe no. So I'm like, I'm right now I'm at the point where I'm like, unless someone says an association, or I go and read some alchemy, I go and read some Mycia Eliade, try to find out some connections between alchemy and mythology, and bundle it all together and hit the right one that Miyazaki was thinking about at the time. Or either that or DLC. I think it might actually just be uninterpretable without more.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree. I think that it's so strange because, like, some of the most important things in the game are the most mysterious. Whereas, there's lots of details that are very clear, very explicit, and seem very significant. So you have these sort of pieces of the puzzle, and I kind of wonder if that's intentional. If it's I mean, we know that the whole FromSoft thing it's intentionally vague because he wants people to kind of play with the ideas in their head, but I kind of wonder if he deliberately made it like I think there is an answer,
Yeah.
but there just aren't enough clues to be able to say anything for sure. So
Even if someone were to come up with the right solution and then just tell me that, I don't think that they would be able to do it in a convincing way. Even if they write, it's almost like they'd be right by accident. Like even if someone on my comment section says something, and they happen to be right, like I'm not going to give them any credit for it because like no, I don't. I think you leapt to a conclusion and that ended up being right because
right,
you skipped a couple steps. Maybe I'll commend you for your intuition, but that's what it was. Don't sit here and tell me that you had an evidence-based approach that let you get the right answer at this early
right,
stage
right.
in the game.
And I mean, like, there's so much that I still like. We've talked all about the Erd Tree and spirits and immortal essence and all this stuff, and like, we haven't talked about Mikola or Moog, the
Yeah.
Formless Mother, the Blood Star. Like, what the hell is all that? I have no idea.
So
That seems really important,
if you
but
got I didn't ask you before this thing started, but if you have more time and you want to keep going, I would recommend, unless you have more to say about Melina and Ronnie. But if you do, then that's fine. But after that, Glintstone and maybe the Azure and the Wisdom of Stone, if you have some thoughts on that.
sure. And that's basically what I have is thought, just some thoughts. I don't really have a complete theory. Um, but I mentioned before that the colors in this game are very specific. They're very intentional. Like, even if you look at the world map, like, okay, Caelid's red, Limgrave's green, Liurnia's blue, Altus is gold, the mountaintops and Snowfield are white. Like, very distinct. I don't think that anything is just sort of randomly colored. I think it's all very specific, and they have very specific associations. Glintstone is blue-green, but not all sorcery and not all stones are blue-green. So primal glintstone is dark blue. And there's two different things there. And one interesting thing about that is that Azure is blue-green and Lusat is dark blue. They both replace their heads with glintstone. And Azure studied comets and Lusat studied meteors. One of the things I'm trying to go through some of the Japanese text right now, which is kind of difficult because I don't have a text dump. I'm just going through like the Japanese Fextra and another Japanese wiki, and they don't have any dialogue, which is kind of annoying. But one thing which I think I'm right in saying is that in Japanese, like the kanji for meteor and shooting, flowing, falling star, they're all kind of interchangeable. Like we call, meteors shooting stars, but we don't really mean that they're like a star. But I think they might be the same thing in Elden Ring. Like that a meteor might actually be a falling star. Which I think makes some things a little bit more understandable. Because the Elden Beast came down on a star. On a golden star. And this is also the golden meteoric ore is what the Onyx Lords used to create their swords that push things apart. So, okay, you sort of like order, essentially. And then Selen has this line about like golden amber being the remnants of ancient life, and thus it houses their vitality. Whereas glintstone is the remains of residual life, and it houses its vitality.
Of the stars.
Of the stars, yeah. But she says residual life specifically about
Yes.
about that,
Yeah.
about glintstone.
Yeah.
So okay, you have blue and blue green, and one thing about green is that like if you add gold to blue or yellow to blue, it becomes green. I I'm not entirely sure where this leads, but there is something about like if you try to exist only as mind, that somehow this is connected with having your body be kind of not living, inorganic. Like Lusat and Ezur, they both replace their heads with glintstone, and they have reached a near inorganic state. And this is somehow connected to them seeing past the wisdom of stone. And the Crystalians, they cleave close to the primeval current. Which is, okay, what does that mean? And they're inorganic beings, yet they live. So one of the things I think this is connected to is, it also says about the Crystalians that they're waiting for their creator to carve them new brethren. And they guard their crystals closely. And so I think the implication is that they can't procreate. They can't be born. This is a very interesting topic in Elden Ring, is like the idea of birth and rebirth. But like, Hyetta says this thing about there was the one great, and then came fractures, births, and souls. And so somehow this is tied with like, the way things are now is that people are born and they have souls. But the Crystalians don't seem to be able to be born. And this is somehow related to them kind of existing only as mind. So I kind of think that the gold, you have the gold and you have the blue. And the gold is associated with red, and the blue is some like mind thing. And this gold-red stuff is like a kind of vital energy. It's like it's close to life itself. It's something living. Whereas this blue stuff is like mind. It's more just free-floating spirit, intelligence, understanding. And that glintstone is, it's this spirit that's been imbued with the remains of this gold red vital spirit stuff. So they've mixed in a little bit of the remnants, the residual life that came from this ancient primal vital energy that's red and gold, and that's been mixed into the stars, which are just like pure mind. So
Right.
I'm speaking in like very
This would make a lot more
kind of broad terms, but yeah.
This would make a lot more sense with the line that Selen says that we are children of the stars. She says
Right.
at one point in her quest line. And I was like, well, hang on now, teacher. You didn't mention any of that before this lesson. What do you mean we're the children of the stars? But that would make a lot more sense if you take it in that direction. One of the interesting things that Dark Souls and Demon Souls have had, they're not necessarily connected in a lore way, but they're connected in a thematic way. For example, souls in Demon Souls and Dark Souls function the same, not just in gameplay, they function the same in what they are. So in Demon Souls, they reveal what a soul is and what a soul does. In fact, it tells you right in the beginning. It says,
The very beginning,
at the
yeah.
beginning, the god gave man a soul, and with it clarity. And then you talk to the Monumental at some point in the game, and he further tells you what that means. And what he tells you is that the soul is basically the mind. It's what allows you to distinguish things. It's the thing that allows you to see one thing from another. It's clear. It's literally clarity. It's what allows you to not go insane. So when on the second day they made the soul devouring demon, the reason that land is covered in fog is because the demons are eating the souls, and people can't differentiate.
Right.
It's literally covered in a fog that you can't see things in there anymore. You're not able. There's no clarity because it's foggy. Like it's very on the nose. And in Dark Souls, there's never anything that says that it doesn't work that way. In fact, the Maiden in Blacks, when you level up, her thing that she says is soul of the mind, key to life's ether. Right. Okay, that's soul of the mind. All right. And in Dark Souls 3, the Firekeeper, when you level up, you have to turn the volume up real high to hear all this, but she basically says the entire chant that the other one says, but with little changes to it, but basically paraphrasing the exact same thing that the Candle Maiden was saying from Demon Souls. So they function identically. And I'm mentioning this because in Dark Souls 1, there was this thing with crystals and Seath and souls, and they never elaborated on that. They just said a couple of weird things about them, and never explained it. So they said the most interesting line I remember from that is saying that the relationship between souls and crystals and sorceries is really weird. Is basically what the item description says.
I vaguely remember that item description. Yeah, and I mean, and there is this idea that the ancient dragons in Dark Souls 1, that the ancient dragons were immortal, and that was because of their stone scales, and that Seath tried to kind of recreate this immortality using crystals. And then in Elden Ring, you have the ancient dragons are immortal, and it's because of their stone scales. And then these people are trying to restore the primeval current and see past the wisdom of stone. And also glintstone sorcerers view the body as transient. And that there's this idea that, I don't know, maybe they are also seeking a kind of immortality in the stars, like that they're freeing their spirit, and by detach, because also the primal glintstone, like Selen has this primal glintstone which houses her essence, there's a talisman which says like sorcerers would literally like cut open their hearts and replace it with this thing, because they didn't care about their body, they didn't care about that it's just this stone that is imbued with some essence of them.
It's a crystal.
So it's a crystal. Yeah. I mean, so I think it's literally like the same thing.
Yeah. So yeah, and there is a thing where Selen literally moves from one body to the next, and she's like perfectly fine with it. It's like, look at me, I'm like 12 years younger. It's like,
yeah,
this
she's
is
super
great.
happy about it. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I think you're right. Do you think you know why Selen turns into a corpse ball of sorcerers at the end of her questline?
Well, it says of the Graven Mass that, let me see if I can. It's better if I find the actual item description. Graven. Yeah. So the primeval current is a forbidden tradition of glintstone sorcery, and this is why Selen was like a heretical sorcerer. I shouldn't say heretical because I don't remember if that's the word used, but she was not accepted by the Academy. And then it says, to those who cleave to its teachings, the primeval current, the act of collecting sorcerers to fashion them into the seeds of stars is but another path of scientific inquiry. So I think there is something about, in the way that the sort of gold-red immortal essence, the vital energies of people, they're sort of reborn through the Erd tree. The blue essence is reborn through the stars, and that's why they both govern the fates of people in different ways.
Do you think you know why? Now we brought this up a couple of times. I should have probably talked about this earlier, but do you think you know why the you keep mentioning this system? Why isn't the system working anymore? Like all over the place, they talk about how things were great back in the day. You know, we had this golden amber; it was valued during the age of Godfrey. You have all this stuff's like things were great before Bloodline got diluted. Things are not great now. Things suck now. The tree's not working. Like before, the sacred tears used to go resplendent, go everywhere, given out freely to worshippers of the Erd tree. Not so much anymore. You know, now that you can barely find any in the churches. The seeds bust out all over the place. The Erd tree seeds, as if an act of desperation. You know.
Yeah, I highly speculative stuff, but to me, the thing that seems to fit that the best is like this idea that if you extend something too long, it's not good.
Yeah.
If you break the natural order of things, right, then it sort of decays, and that what seems to be the problem with the Erd tree system is that there's no fire. Like fire is shunned, it's rejected. But like if things are like when things rot, you fight them with fire, right? That's literally what we see in Caelid. When things are grown past their, I don't know, their natural point, like fire destroys that. This is sort of broad. I'm speaking in very abstract terms, but that seems to me the thing that's because like you have all these different types of fire, but they're all missing from gold. Like they're all either abandoned or hidden away and rejected, and even the idea of like maybe the Erd tree itself, maybe it started as like maybe you had the Great Tree, and then the Erd tree grew out of all these spirits that it keeps on absorbing the vital energy of, and that now it's kind of, I don't know, it's past its prime. It needs to be burnt for some reason. And maybe if Marika is behind everything, maybe she realized that. Maybe that's why she wanted to merge with Radagon, or if she did want to merge with Radagon, or if she was forced to, because Radagon understood something about how fire was part of the Golden Order. And maybe that's what she was searching the depths of the Golden Order for. That, like, yeah, the cardinal sin,
Because
the burning
he might
of
have
the
been
Erd tree.
part fire giant.
Well, or either part fire giant, or maybe he was a fire monk, or maybe he was just someone who, like, who understood something about fire by being such a devout follower of the faith. I'm not entirely sure, but it seems like it's also so weird because like when you talk to Enya about burning the Erd tree, she's like, "Oh my God, that's the first cardinal sin." But actually, yeah, okay, why not? Yeah, do it. It's very weird. So there's this implication that like maybe fire is what's needed, and not necessarily as like a method of burning everything down, not like the flame of frenzy, which is like no, let's take it all out. It's not that. It's more like we need to add fire back into this system because it's unnatural for it to have maybe overgrown.
Right. Yeah, I figured that might be part of Marika's motivations. Okay. Yeah, I think that's fine.
Yeah, it's hard to draw more about that. I mean,
Like I keep saying, there's just not enough here.
yeah,
But
I mean, I think there is all this stuff with like the Eternal City, and if Marika is connected to this, they had a dark moon, and there's all this stuff associated with silver, which is also what the Black Knife assassins wear. And the thing about silver seems to be that it's, in comparison to gold, it's like, it's inanimate. Like, okay, the gold scarab and the gold foul feet, like, you get more runes, which is like the spirit essence stuff that makes you stronger. This makes you more vital. And the silver scarab and the silver foot, you get items. They're like dead things. And the silver tears, like, they're just as much, what does it say? Like, maybe it's the larval tear that says that they're just as much substance as organism. Like, they're somehow inanimate in a way. And maybe this is why, like, Marika, if she was lacking... Oh, and it also says that the Numen are long-lived but seldom born. So it's like there's something about birth. They're lacking this vital energy. And so Marika first goes for Godfrey because he's like this wild guy, right? He literally needs to be held in check by a lion. But that doesn't quite...
the fucking lion?
Oh man, I've been working now on something on beasts, and it's so confusing. It's so confusing. I mean, why does Radagon have wolves and
yeah,
Blythe is Ronnie's stepbrother, which could just be like they were just...
Wait, who's
Blythe?
Oh yeah.
And
the Marika, Marika's brother's Malekith. Her maybe her step. It says
I think half brother.
Like yeah.
And
what the fuck does that mean? Who's the other half?
Who's their parent? Or I mean, I do know. Like, you remember in Dark Souls 3, there were people talking about how the painter said that Gale was her uncle. And then, you know, okay, I don't think that means that he's really, like, blood related. It's just, like, that's an endearing term. So I wonder with those terminologies, like half-brother or step-brother, okay, maybe.
That does make sense.
But then there's also stuff with, like, the Albinarics being sort of connected with silver, and also that the Albinarics, the first generation Albinarics, they go to have the Haligtree, and the second generation they sort of like go to Moog, and then Moog steals Mikola, and he puts him on this giant like pelvic bone, and this is somehow associated with the Formless Mother, and the Albinarics ride wolves, and then the beasts
pelvic bone.
Yeah, if you look at Mikola's cocoon, it's like sitting on this giant pelvic bone in the Mogwin dynasty.
I had no idea that. I never saw that, but okay.
But yeah, like the Albinarics ride wolves. They have this connection with wolves. Like Lieutenant calls Lobo her better half, her other half. They're like, I don't know, they're connected in some way, which is weird. And then you also have this stuff about the beasts being granted intelligence. And they were proud of this, and they were proud of their 5 fingers. Okay, what does that mean? And why? There's another thing. The Beast Crest Heater Shield says that like the Beast Crest symbolizes. It's a reminder to warriors not to succumb to the fervor of battle, something like that. So there's this implication that like being a beast is somehow more controlled than a person, and this may have something to do with the whole struggle.
No,
and
I don't. I'm not sure that that's what that's implying. I think that they started off bestial and they gained intelligence, and they're trying to not go back to being bestial. And Sarash, because he's a beast, that's what he's there to do, because like the beasts are very, very let's not go back to being beasts. So he has him as a beast chancellor. Why the fuck is he a beast chancellor?
The beast regent, yeah.
And he's just there to remind Godfrey not to succumb to, his bestial nature. He's war-loving, Ishinashina looking ass.
Yeah, and another thing that's mentioned is Sarash guided the Golden Lineage, which is strange because
because he's gone.
he's gone. He's not there. And then there's also when you fight God. I mean, this just goes on and on. Like when you fight Godfrey, Serash is like a spirit on his back, and then when it's clear that you're like strong enough to kind of stagger Godfrey and make him, it gives him pause, then Serash starts becoming physical. He's like entering the physical realm, and Godfrey's like, no, I'm gonna kill you instead, and I'm gonna become Horalu again. I have no idea what that's all about. No clue.
It looked like Serash was trying to fight you himself, and then Horalu kills him.
Right.
I don't know. I don't even know what the symbology could mean. Like what that's supposed to symbolize.
It's very strange. It's very strange.
Unless Serash symbolizes civility, like the dignity of an Elden Lord, and that's what he kills, to become Horalu once more. But he had Serash as Horalu, didn't he? Like you can see it in the opening trailer. He's got
it's actually said very explicitly that he took Serash on his back when he became Godfrey, or when he became Elden Lord.
Yes, but when he returned to being Horalu outside the Lands Between.
Oh, I see. Right after the long march, he still had
like. In the opening cutscenes, you have it switches between Horalu, chieftain of the Badlands, and you can see Serash. You can see Serash back there.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, okay, Marika married this guy Godfrey because he was like this crazy wild warrior, but in order for him to I mean, maybe it's her idea to take Serash on his back, and that may have some connection to like Malekith.
I really don't think so. I really don't think it was Marika's idea at all, because that reason she wanted him around was because he's crazy. He was this warrior king, and he had battles to win. She didn't need a dignified guy, and it was specifically when he had no more battles to fight that she got rid of him.
Right. That's a good point. Yeah. The beasts are, and I mean, I have no idea if this is connected at all, but the final boss is called Elden Beast, and the Elden Stars incantation calls it a beast. It's not a dragon, even though it looks sort of draconic.
I've never thought it was a dragon. A lot of people say dragon in my comment sections. I'm like, no.
I don't think it's.
No.
I mean, maybe like a salamander or like it looks more like an amphibian or something. But I mean, it's got these sort of wing-like things, and it resembles in some ways a dragon, but it's called a beast, and I don't know that the whole thing with beasts. I mean, I kind of think of Bloodborne and this idea that like maybe in Bloodborne the people were originally
the word
beasts.
Civilization caught my attention the first time I saw it, when it talked about they gained intelligence, and I think it says somewhere along they became more civilized. I'm pretty sure the word either civilized or civilization caught my attention when it said that. I'm very in tune when they start talking about civilization. I'm like, oh, I think but I couldn't derive anything from it.
Right. Yeah. No, I don't. I don't know what to make of the beasts at all. I wanted to, because you were asking earlier about like why things have kind of collapsed, why things are bad now, essentially. And I wanted to kind of talk about like the Elden Ring itself, that pattern, because you get these great runes, and it's kind of weird because you get them, but you can't use them. And then you have to go find like a physical kind of version of it, and then you can use it. But you get these great runes from killing the demigods. And they kind of appear to match up with the design of the Elden Ring. Like, okay, Godric's great rune, it's in the middle. And maybe that was probably like Godfrey's rune at one point. Who knows? Then you have on the right side Radagon's rune, and on the top you have Morgott's rune, and on the left, you have the Great Rune of the Unborn. Okay, but then there are these other runes which are almost like doubles of the runes. So like Rykard's rune, it's got that same line through it in the way that Radagon's does, except that his is like kind of squiggly, which may have to do with his committing blasphemy. And then Melania's rune looks like the Rune of the Unborn, except it's covered in rot. And Mohg's rune kind of like fits into Morgoth's rune.
And Radagon's kind of fiery.
Yeah, so they all have like kind of an aspect of the Shard Bearer, but the important thing being that they like fit on top of each other in a way. And the interesting one there is the Rune of the Unborn, because it seems to fit. It doesn't quite fit where Melania's is. It just has the line in the same place as Melania's. But it's smaller. Like if you look in your inventory, the Great Rune of the Unborn is smaller. And we know that Miquella had a rune or has a rune. But this is very strange because like Radagon gave Rennala the Great Rune of the Unborn in this amber egg. And Rennala uses this. She feeds it larval tears, this core of silver tears, to rebirth people. But the rebirth is kind of just imitation in the way that mimic tears imitate things. Like it's not quite. She can't like perfect it somehow. It's missing something. And this, I don't know. I'm not really sure what to make of this, but the fact that the Great Rune of the Unborn is potentially connected to Miquella, because like Morgoth and Mohg, they're siblings. Rykard and Radagon are siblings. And then you have Melania's rune and the Great Rune of the Unborn. And even the idea of the Great Rune of the Unborn and like Miquella is this eternally youthful thing. He's got this problem with aging. I really don't know what to make of that, but there seems to be something significant there.
So you've just triggered two different thoughts on me. Let me do the first one. I don't know why I never thought of this, but Radagon gave Rennala the golden egg, and the egg had a great rune. How the fuck did he give her a rune? Did he give her the egg at the moment of their divorce, or did he give her the egg after Marika shattered the ring? Because it would make sense if it's after Marika shattered the ring. The ring gets shattered. There's all these different runes, and then he gives one to Rennala. How did he give her a rune before the ring was shattered?
Because well, that's the thing. It's not. Some people say that like, oh, it was his parting gift. That's never said anywhere. It just says that it was a gift. So, here's the line is, Rennala herself is no demigod. She is merely the recipient of an amber egg given to her by Radagon. Her beloved Radagon left her to become Queen Marika's second husband, taking the title of king consort. The great rune dwells within the amber egg that was Radagon's gift to her. So it never says that, like, when this happened. Except that it mentions several times that, like, when Radagon left, it doesn't quite put it in order. It says that, like, she cradled the egg. Where is it? In the end, Lady Rennala was left alone, cradling the amber egg Lord Radagon bequeathed her. Whether that means, like, that happened, like, right after he left, or whether that's just, like, oh, he gave her a gift later on. I don't know. It's very strange, yeah, because as you mentioned, like, okay, if the Elden Ring was whole, then how did he give her a rune? I mean, what is a rune anyway, exactly? Like, how do you give it to someone? Because, like...
We know you can take a rune out without shattering the ring, because Marika did it to take out the rune of death, and the ring wasn't shattered. So I guess that's not so surprising. What's surprising is that he would do that in the first place at that moment. But if he did give it to her when the ring was shattered, post shattering, well then that also falls in line with Marika doing everything because no, I guess maybe not. I don't know. I've lost my train of thought. That's screwed me over. Too many irons in the fire there.
Yeah, I know. I don't know what to make of that. I don't know what to make of that. And it seems to me that
And
there's
why is it
some
an amber egg? Do you have any idea about the amber egg apart from do you think it do you have any idea about the amber egg?
I mean, only that it's clearly golden amber, and there's something about it that's missing. Like, because she keeps on trying to make people who are almost certainly Ranni, like a body for Ranni. There's actually some cut dialogue where she specifically says Ranni. It's not absolutely 100% clear, but I mean, it seems like she's trying to make Ranni, or at least a
What does the
Ranni
dialogue
body.
say?
I'm trying to remember now. She just in that as she's talking to the Sweetings, the Culvers, she says something about Ranni. I just put in Control F Ranni in this document. There's 157 things, so I may find that afterwards and send it to you. But
Okay.
yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, amber egg. Okay, well, amber houses the vitality of ancient life, and inside it you have a rune, and then you put in this core of a mimic tier, and it's like silvery, and this creates it births something new, but this birth is lacking something important. It's not quite right. And maybe also, like, all the Sweetings, they're like crawling, kind of like the Albinarics, who are crafted by human hands and seem to be associated with silver.
Hmm. And you
I
use silver tears to get reborn.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it's like it all seems connected. I have no
Yeah,
idea what it
I just
means.
don't know idea how. Okay, okay. We've been at this for 3.5 hours. I just want to get like a couple things through. Glowmite Queen. What the fuck? Like the most
Oh
mysterious.
man.
What?
Yeah.
What? And
What
then Melina, of course, again. But
yes.
what are your thoughts?
Well, so I mean, going back to the idea that like Ranni and Melina, that Melina is like a part of Ranni. One way in which that kind of makes sense is that, like, in the Frenzied Flame ending, Melina's hair turns black, and she opens up her other eye, and like the gold disappears from her right eye. And she appears to kind of resemble Ranni a bit more. And what the Flame of Frenzy does is it removes the distinctions between things. Right? It brings everything back to one. And so maybe the idea is she's actually kind of becoming Ranni again, or like they're converging. And then obviously, people have connected her to the Gloam-eyed Queen because she opens this eye, and you could say that it's Gloam colored. I don't know about that.
Well, for me, the better connection is that she says that she's going to bring you destined death,
Destined death,
and the
right.
and the Gloamite Queen is, and also she was making a case for pro births in the Flame of Frenzy thing. She's like, don't do this. I'm very pro birth, and the Gloamite Queen is associated with births. She has the birthing cloth for the Godskin Apostles.
Here's my theory. I don't know how speculative this is. I think that Ranni at one point served the Golden Order as the wielder of destined death, as the Gloam-eyed Queen. At some point, she rejected the Golden Order, and she figured out she was taught something by a Snow Witch about how to see and understand a world of spirit that didn't exist with vital energy. And the sort of this division between things. And she then cast aside her body because she didn't want to be controlled by this fate. And in doing that, she created Melina. So I'm not I'm not entirely sure about that, but it seems to make sense. Because also the one thing we know about the Gloamite Queen was that she was an Empyrean. And she's the only other person that's mentioned as an Empyrean besides Ranni, Mikula, and Melina. So, and like, okay, I guess it's possible for an Empyrean to, yeah.
Didn't the Gloamite Queen wage war against Malekith and was eventually, her and the Godskin Apostles were defeated by Malekith, and that's what allowed the Rune of Death to be sealed?
Yes, that's right.
I don't think they would have allowed Ranni to keep her privileged position as the lunar princess if she had already betrayed Marika before, especially not Morgott, because he had that whole confederacy with, the 6 demigods were sitting there. That whole thing seems to be them ruling in Marika's absence, for at least for a little bit. And then there's a stone.
You're talking about the chairs in.
Yes.
I mean, if they're all sitting in chairs, I don't know. I sort of took that to be that was maybe when Marika was there.
Well, maybe, yeah, okay. But
it could have been. It's not clear when that happened, or even whether or not that means that they were all there at the same time. But
the thing is that there's a stone sword, and it talks about a golden. God, what was that sword? It says something like their alliance, an uneasy alliance, falls apart because of conspiracy. They don't trust each other. So it seems to me like this. So it seems to me that they had an uneasy alliance. They're all sitting in the chairs, and then the Black of the Knife thing happens.
Yeah,
and they're still sitting in the yes, Night of the Black Knives happens, and the Erd Tree Sentinel is like, never again, and they get those torches, and they make preparations to make sure that they can't do that anymore, and they take measures against the Black Knight assassins. And the alliance is uneasy because they're suspicious of each other in their right to be, because Ranni and Rykard at least were part of the conspiracy, and that whole thing falls apart, and then the shattering happens. That seems to be what that stone sword was implying.
Right. No, I think that's probably right. Yeah, and it says, I think, traces of am I right in saying it says a bloody conspiracy?
Yes, I think so.
So that word sort of caught me off guard. I'm really not sure. This is like very sort of leapy for me, but it just seems that like it would be so weird if there was another Empyrean out there who we never met, who was not one of the demigods, and was just a completely different person. That seems so strange. And the fact that like she controls death, or she wields death through this fire, and then Ranni somehow understands, she like steals the Rune of Death, and
is able to infuse daggers with it.
She's able to infuse daggers with it. She like understands it somehow. She's able to use it. And then there's also like
that's not that unhinged. I was thinking about that. It's like that's not that unhinged as I thought.
And there's also, I mean, Melina is burned and bodiless, and then also she knows somehow how to transport you to Farum Azula because Malekith is there. But presumably, like Malekith is kind of hidden away. The most likely person to have known where.
She's got the Black Knight Assassin moveset.
Right.
And also, she talks about destined death, and she has a Gloam eye.
And also the ghost flame, is this flame that you burn the dead with long before the Erd Tree, and that is related to like releasing the spirit from its physical body, maybe. And it's also cold. So there's just all these like things that kind of, it just makes more sense if Ranni was the Gloamite
If the DLC
Queen.
came out and said more along those lines, I think that would I think I
Yeah.
would not be surprised. I think you might be onto something. That's at least as credible as any other thing I've heard in relation to this. Like it was kind of far fetched when it was just like Melina's the Gloamite Queen. But now that we've talked about maybe Melina and Ranni are the same person originally, divided, and then that would mean they were both at some point the Gloamite Queen. That makes way more sense. All those associations have a lot more to do with each other.
Yeah,
Um,
and even the tattoo on Melina's eye,
yeah.
whether if it's the three fingers or if it's a crowfoot, like, well, okay, the crowfoot kind of sounds like the death birds, and I don't know. There's too much like all those they're only associations, so I don't want to like conclude that Ronnie's the Glomite Queen. But I don't see another
Some
good
people think
candidate.
that
Uh-huh.
so this might actually be in favor of what you're saying. That some people talk about the beast eye that you get from Gurek, and how the beast eye has a claw mark running through it, and it's kind of blue colored, kind of gloam colored a little bit, and you use it to be able to see Deathroot, which is touched by destined death. That's what that is. So that would make a lot of sense if because the claw on Melina's eye is like a tattoo of a claw that is like so it maybe took her eye. Greg took her eye in because we know that they fought.
Right.
So that would make some sense.
Yeah, yeah, that would kind of connect, and oh man, yeah. There's just a lot of different. There's a lot of different pieces to it. I don't really know what to make of it.
All right. Well,
There's also there's also
go
people
ahead.
have said that Ronnie's rune may be in the Dark Moon, which I was very skeptical of and still am. But then you also see the Dark Moon ring has this kind of thing in it which kind of looks similar. This like vertical line with some. It's
Mm.
messy. It's messy. So I'm not like I could absolutely be seeing things here. But then if you also think about the Helfin steeple and the fact that this is this wood that guides people who are dead, and it's got these like branch marks, and then you think about the big Elden Ring logo with these sort of branch marks. I I don't know if I'm going crazy or not. I feel like it's all connected. It's all connected in some way.
Humans are pattern recognition machines, and
Yes.
it's so hard to not lose when you're trying to figure out this kind of thing because Miyazaki. The problem is, see, Miyazaki's become too refined. He's become too refined at what he does. When he's making Demon Souls, when he's making Dark Souls, I'm sure I could have gotten it better. He's not as sophisticated a video game maker. He doesn't he's only hiding it a kinda. It's not like this. This is ridiculous. This is
Yeah, well,
crazy.
and I think it's also that this seems to me like the first game that they really finished. I mean, I understand there's some stuff which maybe there's cut content with the Colosseums and like Saint Trina and stuff, but it feels
Dark Souls
way
wasn't finished.
more. No, I
Yeah.
mean they were rushed on almost everything, and they radically
Yeah.
changed. Like Dark Souls 3, oh my god, that radically changed, and Bloodborne, and I don't know Sekiro so well. I actually never finished it, but maybe that's a bit more complete. But it's also a bit different to the other ones. But like from the
What do
beginning,
you make
it was.
of I'm sorry to rush you, but I kind of want to get through the last few things that I want to
Oh yeah, sure,
deal
sure,
with.
yeah.
What do you make of the moons? The two moons, and one moon is visible in the east, pretty much at all times, and one moon you can only see from Ronnie's marriage area. The chapel.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't really have like thoughts about it. I have like connections. So
Right.
the Moon of Noxtella talisman says that it's like a leaden full moon, and Ronnie's Dark Moon sorcery says that no, maybe it's the Dark Moon ring, is that it's a full moon. Like the Dark Moon is a full moon, but it's leaden. It's like it's inert somehow. And maybe that's because it's not reflecting light. Okay, what does that mean exactly? And also, Renala's full moon sorcery does not do any frost damage. So the fact that it's a dark full moon has something to do with it being cold. And then there's also, this is more of a reach, but like there's this stuff with the eclipse, which that's another
Oh my god, the eclipse.
the eclipse.
Oh my god.
Which is associated with death somehow, because like the eclipse shotel, you can give it this death flare thing.
And it seems that Miquella is trying to use whatever that is to try and give Godwyn a permanent death.
Yes. Or maybe rebirth. I don't know.
Well, in his poem that he sings, it says, "Brother, dear brother, please die a true death." So
right, but that's from the Golden Epitaph, and then the stuff with the eclipse is all in Castle Sol. And it's not clear what the point of the eclipse is. But, I mean, one thought I had is, like, an eclipse is literally when the moon passes in front of the sun and it becomes dark. Mm-hmm. So maybe that has some connection to the dark moon. I don't know. that's really as far as I can go with that, because, like, I mean, there is this idea in alchemy that, like, the moon is reflective. So, like, the second stage in the magnum opus by which you create the Philosopher's Stone is called albedo, and it's associated with the moon. But it's not, and this is associated with, like, the division of things into opposites, equal opposites. And that's how you get the red king of the sun and the white queen of the moon. And the moon is thought of as being reflective. And what you need is this sort of internal solar light. You need this gold to appear, and that like produces light by itself. So yeah, that's something. Where that takes you, I have no idea. So people can try to take that somewhere.
Okay. Well, we've been at this for well over 3.5 hours. I think I'm going to have to cut it short. We never got to a lot of the things that I wanted to. We still have, like, probably the biggest one, which is Miquella, and what the hell unalloyed gold is supposed to be.
Oh,
yeah. But we'll have to save it for another time, I think.
Sounds great. Yeah, I mean, this was a super fun conversation. I'm glad we were on the same page about things, a lot of things, and you also had some great criticisms and just clarifying things. I really appreciated that. Helps me get my thoughts in order.
No, yeah. No, same. I think the whole point is I think that when we're dealing with something this obscure, you never know what's going to trigger a thought. And so associations are all we seem to have right now. The lore, when people come out with a lore thing, a video on YouTube, really, and any of the good ones, it's just associations, and probably not as high quality as the ones that we just talked about here. It's like nowhere near as high quality as the associations we were making it in here. You could probably make videos about it and make it better videos than most of the stuff that I see out right now, because it's either just stuff that just happens, and which is fine if you want to just say things that are mostly settled, or they come up with some loose associations, much of what we have here, but much more loose than what you're talking about. I think the whole Alabaster Lord, Onyx Lord, and the push and pull of the two different things and the connections to causality and regression is significantly more sophisticated than anything I've seen on YouTube, maybe even my stuff included.
Oh, well, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I still don't know what it means. So it just seems significant. That's all. So like, I'm trying to approach it from the attitude of like, okay, what is this all about? Like, what's the point? What's the central thing? And
right, me too.
I still don't know that. I still don't know what it seems to be about, like refining things and perfecting them, and progression, and it's too abstract, so
well, it has to be about the same thing that alchemy is about, which is about creating something that's perfect and eternal. Right. It's about refining things, turning the base matter into the Philosopher's Stone. I get that, but I didn't like it has to be like that. That's really all I have. That's the most.
I think that's right. But what that means is a little bit difficult to explain. So, yeah.
But I do think that a lot of what we talked about is going to get, like, I'm sure 6 months from now or whenever Elden Ring DLC comes out, if it comes out at all, and things come out on that, a lot of what we said or speculated about will be vindicated, I'm sure.
I'm hoping so. Yeah, a DLC
Right.
would be great.
Okay, well, I'm actually kind of tired, so I'm going to have to let you go.
Likewise, yeah. Well, it was a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no problem. This has been the Yggdrasil podcast. Thank you all very much for coming.